Hey guys, welcome to Fanfic Fanatics. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was reborn as a Nomu after his tragic end? Movie. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in MHA fanfictions. This story is We Are Monsters by dekuxtogaforlife. Now without wasting any more time, let's dive in. After a long day of being bullied and mistreated by Bakugo and his friends, Deku was walking home from school later than usual, which usually only happens when he had a really bad day. As he was walking alone, he noticed that no one was around, which allowed him to shed a few tears and question why he was born in a world where everyone has a quirk and he doesn't. To Deku. Why is everyone so special, and I'm not? As he was too busy thinking and walking at the same time, he then walked in front of an alleyway where a truck then drives out and hits him head on. After being hit, the person driving gets out of the truck and is revealed to be an old man with a lab coat and gear like goggles. 6 Old man. What did I just hit? The old man goes to the front of the truck and sees blood covering the entire bumper, and just beneath that was a right hand sticking out from under the truck. Old man. Oh no. Seeing the hand, he gets on his knees and looks under the truck and sees Deku's body, which is completely mangled. Seeing his body, the old man knew he couldn't just leave him there, so he pried him out from under the truck and dragged his body to the back, where he then opened the door and tossed his body inside and closed it afterwards. 9 Old man. Now that that's done, I have to clean up quickly. After saying that, he then removed his lab coat and begins to use it to clean up the blood on the ground and in front of the bumper. Once he finished, he then got back into the truck and left as soon as possible. But when he left, he didn't notice that Deku's notebook was on the ground where he died and was covered with a bit of his blood. A couple hours later, the truck then arrived at a secret underground laboratory with some sort of monster-like creatures that were being incubated in containers filled with a green liquid. After parking the truck, the old man gets out of the driver's seat and goes to the back, where he then opens it and pulls out Deku's body and sees that he has died from the blood loss. But while examining his body, the man knew it will be a waste to dispose of his body. 2 Old man. Maybe, just maybe, you can come into usage after all. So the old man quickly took action and began removing every part of his clothes, to where he then began dragging his lifeless body to one of the empty containers and tossed him inside. After doing so, the man pressed the button, which began to fill up the container with the green liquid, which was beginning to preserve his body. Once that was done, he then passed other containers filled with the monster-like creatures until he reached a large computer, where he then pressed a single button to call someone. But in just one ring, the person the man was calling then answered. 3. Hello, Dr. Kyudai Garaki. 1 Dr. Garaki. Hello master, I hope you are doing well today. Yes, I am doing well, but I know you didn't call me to ask about my health. Dr. Garaki. You're right master, I called you because I have another experiment I wish to do, but to do it I'm going to need your assistance. I see, what type of experiment do you wish to do? Dr. Garaki. Well, I just obtained a corpse recently and I wish to bring it back to life, but not as it once was. Instead, I wish to bring it back as a Nomu. As Shigaraki was about to take Deku aka Specimen back to the League hideout, Dr. Garaki gave him a small silver whistle and explained that once blown, Deku will immediately respond to once heard. After knowing that, he put the whistle in his pocket and contacted Kurogiri to open a portal back to the hideout. From doing so, the portal immediately opens and Shigaraki was ready to walk through it, but didn't, since he noticed that Deku has wandered off when Shigaraki and the doctor were talking. So the two shortly split up to find where he's gone. While searching, Shigaraki remembered the whistle that he put in his pocket, so which is inside and pulls it out, but as he was about to blow into the whistle, he suddenly heard something walking on the other side of the containers. So he makes his way to the other side and sees Deku standing in front of one of a container that is incubating a Nomu. Shigaraki. What is he doing? As Deku continued looking at it, he raises his left hand and places it onto the glass, where he then begins leaning closer to it until he places his forehead against the glass. From seeing him do this, Shigaraki grew curious of what he was doing, so he took a single step forward, but from doing so, Deku immediately heard him, which made him back away from the container and look over at Shigaraki. Shigaraki. What were you doing just now? From asking that question, Deku doesn't respond back. Instead, he looks at him as he tilts his head to the right. Shigaraki. Forget it. Come on, we're leaving now. Even from saying that, as Deku just continues looking at Shigaraki, so thing that he is not responding to words, Shigaraki pulls out the whistle and blows into it, where Deku then goes over to him. After seeing that he responded to that, Shigaraki went ahead and began walking back to the portal where Deku followed from behind. As soon as they made it back to the portal, they saw the doctor standing there. Dr. Garaki. It seems that you have found him. Shigaraki. Yeah, I found him standing in front of a container that was incubating a Nomu. Dr. Garaki. I see. Shigaraki. Is there any reason behind why he was doing that? Dr. Garaki. To be honest with you, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Shigaraki. Well, whatever it is, I'm sure that it won't be a problem. To Dr. Garaki. Certainly not. After having that conversation, Shigaraki and Deku walked through the portal and soon arrived back at the hideout, which made the portal behind them disappear. Kurogiri. Welcome back to Mura, and who do we have here? Kurogiri looked over at Deku, who was looking at each part of the room like he has never seen a place like this before. Shigaraki. This is Specimen, he's our new Nomu. Kurogiri. I see, but he looks quite different compared to any of the other Nomu. Shigaraki. Well, that because he's a unique type of Nomu, I can get into details if I wanted to, but I'm not going to, but I will say that he is capable of learning, so to have him learn more, I want you teach him basic things like speaking, writing and even reading. You got that? Kurogiri. Yes, I'll make sure that he reaches these requirements. Shigaraki. Good, and while you're at it, get him some new clothes. I don't want to see him wearing those dirty rags. Kurogiri. As you wish. After that day, Deku was put into the hands of the League of Villains. So as days went by, Deku was being taught simple tasks like reading, writing, and speaking, which was sort of taking a bit longer for him to understand, but gaining a bit of progress from speaking just a few words. Besides his teaching, he was also giving some clothes, which was a white t-shirt, black hoodie, and some pants as well. He was also given a pair of shoes but didn't wear them since he enjoyed walking on his bare feet instead. And besides clothes as well, Deku has also started eating regular food, which was mainly meat that was prepared by Kurogiri himself. So after Deku's studying, Kurogiri brought him to the bar so he can serve him his lunch, but as soon as they entered the bar, they saw Shigaraki sitting in front of the counter, and just by looking at him, Kurogiri knew that he was upset about something. So Kurogiri goes behind the bar while Deku sit on one of the stools. Kurogiri. So care to me, explain to me what is troubling you today. Shigaraki. Sigh. It's that damn hero killer that's been in the news recently. Ever since he showed up and started killing heroes, he's been getting all the attention while we sit here and do nothing. Kurogiri. I see, he could be a worthy ally if you recruit him. Shigaraki. Yeah, maybe, but I don't want him hogging all the attention, so I want to do something to get the attention back to us. As Shigaraki was thinking of ways to get attention back to the league, he looked to his left and saw Deku, who was eagerly to eat. Shigaraki. It looks like I just came up with a good idea. Rooftop. After leaving the league hideout, Shigaraki, Deku, and Kurogiri were on a rooftop in a different city where they overlooked a hero agency that was just across the street. Kurogiri. So what is your idea, Tamura? Shigaraki. Well, it involves that hero agency just across the street, and it also involves Specimen here. Hearing that, Kurogiri puts those two together and figures out what exactly his idea is. Shigaraki. All right, Specimen, you see that building over there? It's filled with prey and I want you to kill them all, do you understand? Deku. Kill. Shigaraki. That's right, kill them all. One hearing those words, Deku's shell quirk covers his face, only showing his eyes. After that, even jumped off the rooftop and landed onto the streets. He then proceeds to walk towards the building, but while doing so he began looking at the building's sky and even the night sky, since it is his first time being outside. After shortly looking around, he soon reached the doors of the agency, which opened automatically for him. As soon as he stepped in, a woman at the front desk saw him. Women, can I help you? As the woman continued looking at Deku, she saw him protruding out his claw-like fingers in both hands. Feeling frightened, she begins to reach under her desk to press a hidden button that will alarm the heroes in the building. But as soon as she was about to press it, Deku begins sprinting until he then leaps over the desk and tackles the woman to the ground, which he then begin mauling her to death with his sharp claws. After killing her, the show that is covering his face lets open like a mouth would you then bite into the woman's shoulder and ripped off a chunk of meat, where Deku then devours it. But as he was devouring the meat, he heard a ding from an elevator. He gets back in his feet and looks over at the elevator, which then opens and reveals 3 heroes inside. 6 Hero 1. What the hell? The heroes noticed him and saw blood dripping from the mouth part of the shell. But before the heroes can run out of the elevators and attack him, Deku Emily jumps over the desk and gets inside the elevator, where he then pins one of the heroes to the wall of the elevator. After doing so, Deku then straightens his sharp fingers and plunges them straight into him. Once his fingers were inside, he sinked his claws into a stomach and pulled it out without any trouble. After ripping his stomach house, the hero falls the ground and dies. Deku turned around and sees the other two heroes in shock for what they just witnessed. They thought of running, but before they could turn around, the elevated doors shut behind them, locking them inside with this monster. 5th floor. As many heroes were having a party in their office, the door suddenly flings open and they see one of the heroes who was in the elevator covered in blood and scratch marks, and was also covering the right with his left hand. Hero 2. Please. Help. Before any of the other heroes could go over to him, a hand with sharp claws then burst through the center of his chest, which horrified all the heroes there. As the hand pulled out of the hero's chest, Big Hero then felt the ground, and from that happening all the heroes in the room saw the one responsible of killing him. So all the Hues in the room got in the fighting stance and was ready to fight this monster. Deku. Kill. Kill. Kill them. All. Rooftop. As Shigaraki and Kurogiri were still on the rooftop looking at the hero agency across the street, they began to hear screams and bloodshed from inside. I knew that Deku was doing as he was told. Shigaraki. It sounds like Specimen is doing as instructed. Kurogiri. Yes, it seems so. A few minutes later, the entire building fell silent, was not even a single sound coming out. Kurogiri. Do you think Specimen killed them all? Shigaraki. Yes, I'm certain that he did. As they were looking at the building, they soon saw the front doors open, and stepping out was Deku, who was completely covered in blood which was not his own. As he was walking out, he stepped into the road, but from doing so headlights from a car signed at him from his left. He looked over and saw a car but didn't know exactly what it was. Thing that it was coming right at him, he saw it as a threat, so as soon as they got close put his left hand out and stopped it once his hand in the front of the car made impact. The driver inside the car was completely consumed with fear as he saw the monster in front of him, but before Deku could harm the driver, he soon heard the whistle which made him head back to Shigaraki by going to the building he was on and climbing up. As soon as you reach the top, he met up with Shigaraki and Kurogiri. To Shigaraki. You did a good job, Specimen. Now I think it's time we get going. Kurogiri. To Kurogiri. As you wish, Tamura. Kurogiri goes ahead and opened the portal, where the three of them proceed to walk through, leaving the area for the police on the other heroes to see what Deku has done. A few weeks after what Deku did in the agency, the media immediately announced a new threat against heroes, which was a monster that slaughtered an entire hero agency without a second thought. They even showed camera footage of what the monster did to the heroes, which was horrifying to see. The footage contained the monster killing the heroes one by one, by mauling, ripping, and even turn them to death. But what was even more shocking was seeing the monster eating some parts of the heroes. After seeing that, people began to fear the monster more than the hero killer, just like how Shigaraki wanted. League hideout. As Shigaraki was sitting at the bar being served a drink by Kurogiri, they were also watching the news about Deku and what he did. Shigaraki. Haha. Looks like Specimen is beginning to get popular on the news. Kurogiri. Yes, it seems so. Shigaraki. I wonder how that damn hero killer is taking this, knowing that there's something more deadlier than him. Kurogiri. If I had to take a guess, he's probably wondering where this monster came from. Shigaraki. If that's the case, then how about we go ahead and show him where this monster came from? Kurogiri. If that's what you want, then I will go ahead and find the hero killer and bring him here. To Shigaraki. Good. By the way, where is Specimen? I haven't seen him today. Kurogiri. Well, he is in his room at the moment learning to read. I gave him some old books that once belonged to you. Shigaraki. I see. Then I guess it's best not to bother him at the moment, so go and find me this hero killer. Kurogiri. As you wish. After he said that, he didn't open the portal and walk through it. As soon as he left, Shigaraki removed the hand on his face. Please stay on to the bar counter, where he then grabbed his drink and began taking a sip out of it. Ua High. At the school of Ua, many students began heading home after school ended. Amongst the students walking home was Katsuki Bakugo, who was being accompanied by his group of friends, which were Eijiro Kirishima, Denki Kaminari, Honta Siro, and Mina Ishido. As they were walking to the train station, Denki and Kirishima began talking about the monster. Denki, I still can't believe some random guy killed an entire hero agency on his own. Kirishima, yeah, I can't believe it either, but I don't think it was some guy. Denki, oh come on, it has to be a guy in a suit. Do you actually believe it was some monster like they say it was? Kirishima, I do believe it, because when I saw that footage they showed, I knew that thing wasn't even human. Denki, Peef, yeah whatever, I still think it's a guy in a suit. Kirishima, well, believe what you want to believe, I still think it's an actual monster, right Zero? Zero, whoa, why are you bringing me into this? Kirishima, because I know you think that thing is a monster. Denki, oh come on, there's no way that Zero here believe it was a monster. Zero, actually I kind of do. Denki, what? Kirishima, see, I told you. Denki, well, if you two believe it's a monster, then me and Ishido believe it's a guy in a suit, right Ishido? As they looked back at Mina, they saw that she was strolling through her phone with your earphones on, which meant she wasn't even listening to their conversation, but soon noticed that the three of them were looking at her, so she took off your earphones to see why they were looking at it. 1. Mina, why you guys staring at me? Denki, well, we are having discussion if that monster guy was either a person in a suit or an actual monster, and these two say that it's a monster, so what do you think, is it a guy in a suit or some monster? Mina, well, if I have to be honest, I think it's definitely a guy in a suit. Kirishima, what? How can you even tell? Mina, well, I've seen a lot of monster movies and I can definitely tell when things are fake, and that monster guy was definitely wearing a suit. 2. Denki, there, now we all know it's a guy in a suit. Kirishima, no, it's a monster. Denki, a guy in a suit. Kirishima, monster. Denki, suit. As they kept arguing, they began to irritate Bakugo from what this monster was. Bakugo, will you two shut the hell up? Who cares what it is? It's just some other damn villain who's going to end up beaten into hell by the pros, so shut up about this monster crap already. 1. Denki, alright, we'll stop talking about it. Bakugo, you better. During the walk to the train station, they all remained quiet to not irritate Bakugo. Once they all arrive at the train station, Mina soon brought up the sports festival, which is tomorrow. From bringing it up, they began talking about it further, but Bakugo didn't even bother talking about it at all. As soon as the train arrived, they all got on. After 30 minutes train ride, it then stopped at another train station, which was Bakugo's stop. He gets off the train, ignoring the others telling him goodbye. Have you left the train station? He began to make his way home, but on his way he suddenly saw Inko Midoriya putting up missing flyers of Deku on light posts. Seeing this, he continues walking, hoping that he'll walk past her without her noticing him. So as he continued walking, he managed to walk past her as her back was turned, but suddenly she drops all the flyers onto the ground, which makes Bakugo look over his shoulder to see her beginning to pick them up from the ground. Bakugo, damn it. Bakugo goes ahead and turns around and approaches Inko. As soon as he got close, he kneeled down and began picking up the missing flyers as well. As he did so, Inko noticed him, but she doesn't say a word. Instead, she continues picking up the flyers. After all the flyers were picked up, Bakugo handed the ones he picked up to Inko. Inko, thank you for helping me, Katsuki. Bakugo, don't mention it, Miss Midoriya. Well, I should be on my way now. Inko, well, okay, be safe. Bakugo, I will, goodbye. Bakugo then turned around and began walking home, but as he was doing so, he looked over his shoulder and saw Inko beginning to put up the flyers again. Once you arrive home, his mom greeted him, but he didn't say anything back to her. Instead, he went to his room and dropped his bag. After doing so, he then sits on his bed and looks over to his wall, where he has a missing flyer of Deku and connected to that with red string that was also connected to pictures and notes of Deku. 2. Bakugo, where are you, Deku? As the next day came, the sports festival of UA began, which Shigaraki was watching on his laptop in his room. And since he was busy with that, Kurogiri was still out looking for the hero killer, which means Deku was in his own room reading through the books he was given. But as he read through some of the books, he began having trouble pronouncing some words and sentences, which made him angry and tear out a page from the book and toss it to the other side of the room. But even after ruining some of the books, he still had planning to read through, so he kept trying to read the best he could, will always end up damaging the books out of frustration. So as he grabbed another book by its cover, something suddenly fell out from in between the pages. From that happening, Deku looks down and sees a thin book with a colorful cover and large man whose face is scratched off. So he goes ahead and drops the book he's holding and reaches down to grab the thin book and hold it up, where he then tries to pronounce title. Deku, Sim, Bowl, of, Peace. After pronouncing the title, Deku goes ahead and flips open the book and sees colorful pictures in different panels of the pages, immediately enchanted of all the colorful pictures he is seeing right before his eyes. But as he was looking at the pages, he noticed that the large man from the cover also has his face scratched off in the pages as well. But Deku thinks that's just part of the book, so he continues looking through the pages until he sees a speech bubble next to the large hero, which Deku then tries to read. Deku, I am here. After just saying those 3 words, Deku continued reading through the pages, which was so fascinating to him. But as soon as he flipped through the final page, he was able to see the large man's face, which wasn't scratched off. From seeing that man's face, he notices a big smile on his face, which was something that Deku has never seen before, since he has never experienced any emotion similar to this. So wanting to know how it feels, Deku begins to imitate the smile he sees on the page. But in his attempt to smile, the door to his room suddenly opens, and which makes him stop and look over at the door to see Shigaraki holding a plate with food that is for him. But as Shigaraki looked at Deku, he noticed the thin book he was reading, which made him drop the plate of food and go over to snatch the book from his hands. As he did this, Deku tried to reach out to grab it, but immediately stops from seeing Shigaraki's angry face, which caused him to pull his hands back. 1. Shigaraki, listen here, specimen. This here is trash and needs to be destroyed. From saying that, Shigaraki went ahead and placed all 5 of his fingers on the book, which began to fully disintegrate. Once the book was fully disintegrated, he wiped off his hands and looked at Deku. Shigaraki, remember this, specimen. Heroes are nothing but our enemies. When I demand you to kill a hero, you do it. Am I clear? 2. Deku nodded his head yes and looked away from Shigaraki's angry face. After seeing that, Shigaraki went ahead and left the room. Once he was gone, Deku went over to the disintegrated remnants of the book on the floor and began grabbing the pieces. But just from touching them, they all disintegrated even more. Seeing that the one book he enjoyed reading was now gone forever, which made him felt very sad. Hours later, Kurogiri returned with the hero killer and had him wait at the bar as he goes to get Shigaraki and Deku. He went ahead and went to Deku's room first. From opening the door, he sees him eating his food on the floor, so he goes over to him and kneels down to stop him from eating any more food from the floor. After doing so, he then disposes the food and the broken plate in a small portal. Kurogiri, you should not eat food off the floor. It is unsanitary and could make you sick. 3. Deku, sorry. Kurogiri, it is fine, specimen. Just do not eat any more food off the floor. Deku, oh okay. After that, Kurogiri got up from the ground along with Deku as well. The two then left the room and began making their way to Shigaraki's room, which was just down the hall. As soon as they reached his front door, Kurogiri went ahead and opened it and saw Shigaraki sitting in front of his laptop watching the UA Sports Festival. Kurogiri, Tamura, I found the hero killer. He is waiting for you at the bar. Shigaraki, good, then it's best that we don't keep him waiting. As Shigaraki got up from his chair, Deku got a glimpse of the screen of his laptop, which showed Bakugo as the first place winner of the sports festival. But as Deku looked at him, he really didn't know who he was and why he had a grumpy looking face. But as he was looking at the screen of the laptop, it was then closed by Shigaraki, who's then walked over to Deku and Kurogiri. After that, all 3 of them began to make their way to the bar. Once they went into the bar, Shigaraki and Deku went over to the stools and sat down, as Kurogiri went behind the bar and looked at them. Shigaraki, well, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, hero killer Stain. Stain, so you must be the leader of the League of Villains. Shigaraki, yes I am, and I had you brought here so you can be one of my soldiers. Stain, cut the crap, I didn't come here to join you. The reason why I'm here is to see this monster I've been hearing so much about, so tell me where it is. Hearing this, Shigaraki turned over to Deku, who was spinning around in the stool, so he grabs the bottom part of the stool, which stops it from spinning. 1. Shigaraki, as you can see, this boy sitting right next to me is the monster you've been hearing about. Stain looks over at Deku and analyzes him head to toe. and could hardly believe that the boy with such an innocent-looking face is actually the monster he heard about. Stain, you must be joking. Shigaraki, sorry but I'm not. This boy here is named Specimen and he's my Nomu. Stain, a Nomu huh? Shigaraki, that's right, he'll kill anyone if I told him to. Stain, so he's pretty much your pet. How foolish I was to think that this monster could a formidable opponent for me. It seems that I was wrong, so you may take me back to where you found me. Shigaraki, hold on a second, I gave you the option to join us, which I have to say will be the wisest decision for you. Stain, you are a complete fool to think that I'll join you in your ridiculous league of villains. Hearing all that from Stain made Shigaraki very angry, which Deku and Kurogiri noticed right away. Shigaraki, then if you're not going to join us, then it doesn't matter if I kill you. Shigaraki immediately got off his chair and ran towards Stain. I'm trying to extinct to grab him with his hand, but as soon as he got close, Stain overpowered him and pinned him to the ground and stabbed him through his right shoulder. Stain, listen here Tamura Shigaraki, you are nothing compared to me. I could easily kill you with just one strike, do you understand? Shigaraki, yes I understand loud and clear, but he doesn't. Suddenly Deku appeared behind Stain and inserted his claws into Stain's left shoulder. After that he then threw him across the room, cracking the bricks when he hits the wall, but even after being thrown he quickly recovers and gets back on his feet and looks over at Deku, who is ready to attack when told. Stain, I guess I was wrong about you, Specimen. Deku doesn't say a word back to him, but if that looks at him with the intent to kill. Shigaraki, it's all right Specimen, pull back. Deku does as he's told, and Shigaraki get back on his feet and looks over at Stain. Shigaraki, we may not have the same motives, but we could still work with each other if you are willing. Stain, fine, let's work together for now, in a couple weeks let's meet up in the city of Hosu. Shigaraki, all right, see you then. After that Kurogiri opened a portal which Stain walked through, leaving the hideout for good, but as soon as he left Shigaraki smiled from underneath the hand on his face. Shigaraki, enjoy living for now hero killer, in a couple weeks you'll be dead. As a couple of weeks have finally passed, it was time for the League of Villains to meet with the hero killer in Hosu, so while Stain was waiting on a rooftop, he soon saw one of Kurogiri's portals open out of thin air behind him. Stain, they're here. Stepping out of the portal were Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and Deku, who saw Stain right away as he was standing near the ledge of the rooftop. Shigaraki, so hero killer, what shall we do in the city of Hosu? Stain, 3. The three of you won't be doing a thing, instead you'll stay up here and observe my purge of these fake heroes. Shigaraki, fine, but if you need a little help don't be afraid to call. Stain, ha, don't make me laugh. After saying that, Stain then jumped on to another rooftop and began running on other rooftops to find his target. Shigaraki, well it's about damn time he left. If I had to keep hearing his stupid voice I would have just killed him right away. Kurogiri, well it's good that you didn't Tamura, but are you sure we should kill the hero killer? He could still useful in our cause. Shigaraki, yes I am sure, and I don't care if he could be someone of value, I want him dead. Kurogiri, if that is what you wish, so when shall we release the other Nomu? Shigaraki, when the sun goes down we'll release them upon the city of Hosu, and see how the heroes deal with them. Kurogiri, what about Specimen? 2. Shigaraki turned his head towards his right and looks at Deku, who is staring out at the sunset. Shigaraki, he'll stay here with us for now, so let us see what this hero killer is capable of. After a few short hours the sun has fully set and the sky was now a pitch black. From this Kurogiri went ahead and opened a large portal with a handful of Nomu walked out of and stood right behind Shigaraki. But from their arrival Deku goes over to them and looks at them as they look back at him. From this happening Shigaraki turns around and sees Deku in front of the other Nomu. Looking at this sight reminds him of when he saw him standing in front of one of the containers back at the lab. Suddenly unexpectedly the headless Nomu kneels down in front of Deku, which surprised Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Suddenly the headless Nomu raises his right hand and opens his palm out to Deku, who then does the same and they both put their palms together. 6. Shigaraki, Kurogiri, do you have any clue what they are doing? Kurogiri, well if I had to make a guess, it must be some sort of bond. Shigaraki, a bond huh? Kurogiri, Yes, and it seems that Specimen and the other Nomus have made a bond with him, but it's nothing to worry about. Shigaraki. Good. Specimen, come here. Deku does as he is told and runs back to Shigaraki's side. After that, Shigaraki orders the Nomu to cause a rampage in the city. After hearing their orders, they go ahead and do as they are told and jump off the building and land in the streets, where they begin to start their rampage. Seeing the other Nomus jump off the building, Deku wanted to join them. I was nearly about to jump off the building as well, but Kurogiri stops him by grabbing him by the shoulder, which made him look over his shoulder to look at Shigaraki and Kurogiri. Shigaraki. Specimen, now is not your time to go, so just wait until then. Deku. Oh, okay. So Deku stayed put with Shigaraki and Kurogiri on the rooftop. Have they looked out to the city, which was being attacked by the other Nomu? But as the city was being attacked, Stain was about to kill a hero, but before you could, he noticed smoke from a fire, wishing you had to be the cause of Shigaraki. Stain. That damn fool. Once I'm done here, I'll go kill him and that monster of his. As Stain raised his katana up to finish off the hero in front of him. But before you can kill the hero, he then sensed something coming his way. He quickly reacts and looks over towards his right and sees another hero running very fast towards him. So Stain turns his attention towards him. As soon as the hero is getting closer, he launched himself off the ground and came in with the flying kick. But before he can make impact, Stain is quick to react to this. He bends backwards and lets the flying kick go right over him. After that happened, the hero managed to get back on the ground and stomp his momentum of speed and turn to face Stain. Stain. It looks like another hero came to save the day, so care to tell me which hero I'm dealing with? From him saying that, the hero goes ahead and remove his helmet, which he then throws the ground and looks at Stain with anger. Iida. I am Tenya Iida, the little brother of Tensai Iida, also known as Ingenium, who you permanently paralyzed, and I'm here to get my revenge. Stain. Is that so? Then how about you put it into actions instead of words? Right after he said that, Iida rushed over towards Stain and began attacking with his kicks. But Stain was too fast and easily dodged them. From doing so, he managed to get a cut on Iida's face. Now that his blade had a bit of Iida's blood, he went ahead and licked the blood off, which suddenly paralyzed Iida. From that happening, Iida fell to his knees and Stain began explaining why he harmed his brother and why he kills certain heroes. But as he was doing so, he had no clue that he was being watched the entire time by Shigaraki. Shigaraki. Well, it looks like a hero killer is more skilled than I expected. Kurogiri. He certainly is. Shigaraki. But let's see how he fares against our little monster. Shigaraki lowers the binoculars from his eye and looks over at Deku, who's staring out at the city. Shigaraki. Specimen. From hearing his name, Deku looks up at Shigaraki. Shigaraki. Go kill the hero killer. Deku. Okay. Right after Deku said that, his face began to get covered by the shell quirk. Once his face was fully covered, he then leapt up into the air and landed on the building across the street. From doing so, he then began running on all fours across the rooftops. Kurogiri. So do you think Specimen will be able to kill the hero killer? Shigaraki. To be honest with you, I have no clue. All we can do is just wait and see what. Back in the alley, Stain has just finished lecturing Iida about his motives. So he raised his katana up and was about to strike him down, but while looking up at Stain, Iida suddenly saw a figure falling from above and was heading straight towards Stain. But Stain sees it as well from the reflection of Iida's left eye, so he quickly turns around and cuts off Deku's left arm. From his arm being cut off, Deku flies past Stain and over Iida, where he then eventually lands off the ground. After that happened, Stain turned around to see Deku's body laying on the ground. Stain. Well, it looks like Shigaraki sent his lapdog after me. Now I'm going to kill him for sure. Right after Stain said that, he then saw Deku beginning to stand back up. Once he got back feet, he turned to face Stain. Stain. Well, I'm impressed. After cutting off your own arm, you're able to stand back up like nothing ever happened to you. Deku look over at his left arm and sees that it's gone, but doesn't feel pain at all. Instead, he closes his eyes, and from doing so, another arm grows right back from where he had his cut off. He opens his eyes and sees that his new left arm is as it used to be. Stain was a bit surprised from seeing this, but knew that Nomu could regenerate and was expecting something like that to happen. Stain. Well, it looks like it's going to take a little bit more than that to kill you, but luckily I have enough time to find out how the two here. As Stain said that, he raised up his katana up to his mouth and licked the blade. but as soon as his tongue touched the blood on his blade, he felt a burning sensation on his tongue, so he moved his tongue from the blade and spit out what he just looked up. After doing so, he looked the back of his blade and saw that Deku's was not red but instead was all black and had steam coming off of it. 1. Stain's mind. His blood, it's toxic, meaning I can't use my quirk to paralyze him. Knowing this, Stain knew that he had a disadvantage since he couldn't quirk on Deku. But even knowing this, he wasn't going to give up, so he pulled out a large knife from behind and dual-wielded 2 blades to fight. Seeing this Deku, it was time to fight, so he began running until eventually he got on all fours and leapt off the ground and headed straight towards Stain's direction. As he was getting closer, Stain threw his knife at Deku, who saw it coming and changed his direction midair, but from doing so Stain strikes Deku across the chest, ripping through his sweater. After he did so, Deku flew past him and landed back onto the ground on all fours. He looked down at his sweater that now had an open hole in the chest part, which made him very angry. Deku, kill, kill, kill. Deku then began rushing towards Stain, who also began rushing towards him as well. As soon as they clashed, Stain struck his katana downwards but was then blocked by Deku's sharp claws. From that happening, they both back away but continue rushing towards each other while attacking the other. The sounds of blades clashing echoed through the alley as Deku's claws and Stain's katana hit one another. As Iida, seeing them fight, he could tell that they are in a stalemate since they are evenly matched, but little did he know he was wrong about that. Stain, why do you fight, monster? Just because your master told you to. You're nothing but a slave and will never understand people's true motives. As Stain yelled that out, he managed to pierce his katana straight through Deku's chest. Stain, straight through the heart. There is no way a monster like you will survive that. As Stain looked at Deku, he suddenly saw him raising his right hand up and sending it downwards. We even breaks the blade of the katana in half. From that happening, Stain tries to back away but Deku faster and first his claws straight through his chest. From that happening, Stain takes one more look at Deku and wonders how he's still alive after having a katana pierced through his chest. Stain, how are you still alive, too? As Deku heard him say that, he leans in and opens the mouth of the shell. But instead of hearing Deku speak, he goes ahead and bites his neck and tears out his throat. After doing so, Deku then pushes Stain's lifeless body off of his arm and onto the ground. After that happened, Deku pulled out the blade from his chest and threw it aside. He then got on his knees and began tearing through Stain's flesh where he began his inside. But as he was eating him, Iida and that other hero was still there and were watching Deku. Stain. As Iida saw this, he couldn't move, not from Stain's but out of fear from what he is witnessing in front of his eyes. Iida's mind. I have to get out of here and tell the pro heroes about this. So as Iida began to slowly pick himself up from the ground, his legs suddenly began trembling, making them fall back, which makes his hero suit make a loud clink. From that happening, he quickly looked over at Deku and saw that he stopped eating and was staring at him instead. Deku gets up and begins walking towards Iida. Once he got close, he squat down and began looking at Iida very carefully, and from seeing his face looking terrified, Deku raised his right hand up that was covered in blood and pressed his pointy finger on the left side of his cheek, where he then began tracing down his cheek to his lips and all the way up to his right cheek. From Deku doing that, Iida looked down and saw that he made a smile using Stain's blood. 1. Deku, I am here. 14. Right after Deku said that to Iida, he then heard the whistle, which made him run back to the direction he came from, leaving Iida and the other Shiro in the alleyway. As soon as Deku returned back to Shigaraki and Kurogiri, he went ahead and called back all the remaining Nomu. Once they all returned, they all walked into a portal and left the city of Hosu. Right after the League of Villains and the Nomu left the city of Hosu, the heroes began helping the injured, but while doing so the heroes soon spotted Iida and another hero walking out of an alleyway, where the heroes approached them. Hero, hey, are you two okay? They didn't respond. Instead, Iida raised his right arm and pointed back into the alleyway. Iida, the hero killer. Hearing that, a handful of heroes began heading into the alleyway. After a minute or so, they soon arrived at the area where the hero killer's lifeless body was laying on the ground with the pool of blood around him. As the heroes got close to his body, they saw that his stomach has been teared open and had some of his organs pulled out. From the sight of this, many of the heroes there began getting nauseous, but the others that weren't getting nauseous at all. Instead, they began to wonder who or what could have done this. Hero 1. What type of person is able to do this? Hero 2. I have no clue. After saying those things, the number 2 hero Endeavor appears from behind them, and standing next to him was his son Shoto Todoroki. Endeavor, what's going on here? As he looked past the hills in front of him, he saw the sight of Stain's body, which disgusted Endeavor down to his stomach. Endeavor, don't just stand there gawking, take his body out of here at once. Heroes, yes sir Mr. Endeavor. After ordering the heroes, they begin carrying Stain's body out of the area. But as the heroes were doing as they were ordered to do, Shoto suddenly spots something off the corner of his left eye. As he turned his head over towards that direction, he sees a severed arm on the ground. So he goes ahead and approaches it. Once he got close, he kneeled down and noticed that it was completely black, so he extended his right hand out to grab the arm, but was then stopped when he felt his father's hand placed onto his left shoulder. Endeavor, it is best that you do not touch that. After that was said, Shoto smacks his father's hand off of his shoulder and gets up from the ground. Todoroki, whatever, just don't touch me. He then began to walk away from his father, who just stared at him walking off. After doing so, he looked back at the arm that is on the ground and reaches down, picks it up. Afterwards he then proceeded to walk alongside the other heroes, who are still wondering what would have killed the infamous hero killer. Weeks later, after the hero killer's death was announced to the public, a video of the hero killer was soon uploaded to the internet, which made certain people follow his ways, but from the end of the video, people begin questioning who killed Stain. Hi. In UA, the students were also talking about the hero killer and his killer that ended his purge of heroes. In the class of 1A, some of the students were also talking about it. Denki, so who do you guys think killed the hero killer? Kirishima, well, if I had to guess, I think it was one of the pros in the area. Denki, I don't really think that's possible, since the hero killer was known to kill heroes after all. Kirishima, yeah, you got a point there. Mineta, maybe it was some vigilante or villain who was probably jealous of him. 2. Denki, yeah, maybe, but I don't think, but I didn't hear any news of a vigilante or villain in Hosu. Mineta, well, that's just my guess, but it doesn't really matter now since the hero killer is now dead and gone. Denki, yeah, true, but you got to admit that guy was pretty cool after hearing his backstory. Right after he said that, the door in the front soon slide open and Iida steps into the classroom. Seeing him, Denki knew that he was in Hosu during his workplace training, so he gets him from his desk and goes over towards him. Denki, hey there Iida, good morning. Iida, morning to you as well. Kaminari, do you need anything? Denki, no, not really, I just wanted to ask you something. Iida, oh, what do you want to ask? Denki, well, since you were in Hosu for your workplace training, I wanted to know if you knew anything about the hero killer's death. As soon as Denki brought that up, Iida's body tensed up as he gripped onto the strap of his bag that is on his shoulder, but as he did this, Denki knew something was wrong. Denki, hey, are you okay? Iida, why yes, a matter of fact, I remembered that I needed to do something at the nurse's office. Denki, oh, then do you mind if I join you? Iida, no, you can't, this is a personal matter. After saying that, Iida then turned towards the door and ran out. But at the same time he ran out, Todoroki stepped into the classroom and was looking over his shoulder, wondering why Iida ran out of the sudden. After doing so, he then looks ahead of him and saw Denki. Todoroki, hey, do you know why Iida ran out of the classroom all of a sudden? Denki, well, he said he needs to go to the nurse's office for something personal. Todoroki, that's weird. Denki, why? Todoroki, because he didn't run towards the direction of the nurse's office. After running out the classroom, Iida was under the stairs breathing heavily as he begins to remember everything he saw back in that alleyway. Iida, get a hold of yourself, Tenya. You can't be seen like this. As Class 1A president, I have to keep my cool, but still I can't help but to remember that thing. The thought of the monster always repeats in Iida's head each time he hears about Hosu. Eventually, after a few minutes, he calmed himself down and began walking back to class. League hideout. As Shigaraki was watching the news, he kept hearing about that he will kill his death, which made him happy to know that he won't be a bother anymore. But while watching the TV, he then hears the door open and looks over towards the door, where he then sees Kurogiri and Deku step inside the bar. From seeing them, he goes ahead and turns off the TV. Deku goes over towards Shigaraki and sits on the stool next to his. Kurogiri goes behind the bar and prepares a drink for Shigaraki. Kurogiri, you seem happy today. Shigaraki, well, of course I am. That bastard is now dead, and he won't be a thorn in my side anymore, and it's all thanks to Specimen here. Shigaraki looks over at Deku, who's chewing on the cord of his hoodie, as he sit there waiting for his meal. Shigaraki, to think, someone with the innocent-looking face was able to kill the hero killer. Kurogiri, well, he's like a rose, a beautiful flower, but could cut with one of its thorns. Shigaraki, I wouldn't compare him to no flower, instead I compare him to a dog, who will obey every order I tell him to. Kurogiri, if that's how you see him, so be it. As Shigaraki got his drink, Kurogiri was in the middle of preparing a steak for Deku, who was leaning over the counter as you can smell the steak being cooked, but while that was happening they then hear the door open, so they look over towards that direction and see Jiren enter inside. Shigaraki, oh, it's only you, Jiren, what are you doing here? Jiren, well, I'm here to introduce you to some people who want to join your League of Villains. Shigaraki, is that so? Then go ahead and bring them in. Jiren, whatever you say, Tamura. Jiren goes ahead and opened the door again. From doing so, two people walk into the room. The two people that walked in was a man and a girl. The man was tall and had a long coat, but the most noticeable thing was some of the burnt scars on his face and arms. Standing next to him was a girl with two messy buns in her hair and was wearing a school uniform. Shigaraki, tell me, Jiren, who exactly am I looking at? Jiren, well, the tall guy here has been recently known to be the one to leave charred bodies around cities, and the girl is known for countless murders. Shigaraki, I see, tell me your names. Toga. I'm Himiko Toga, but you can just call me Toga. I came here to join your league and to find out who killed Mr. Staney. Shigaraki, then how about you, what's your name? Dabi, I've been going as Dabi. Shigaraki, I don't want to know your stupid nickname, I want to know your real name. Dabi, and I'll tell you it when I feel like it. The reason why I'm here is the same as hers, I want to know who killed Stain as well. Shigaraki, is that so? Then tell me, what would you do to the person that killed Stain? Toga, I want to kill them and be them. Dabi, I'm somewhat in the same boat with her, but I just want to kill them. Shigaraki, then if that's the case, Specimen attack. From saying that, Deku's shell quirk quickly covers his face. After that he then gets off the stool and rushes straight towards Dabi and Toga. Seeing him head their way, they ready themselves to attack. But before they can do so, Deku was already too close to even attack. He grabs them both by the neck and pinned them to the wall as he lifts them up from the ground. They both look at Deku as his grip tightens around the neck. Shigaraki, Specimen, don't kill them. From hearing that, he loosens his grip but still keeps it firm around their neck. Shigaraki, now let me introduce you two to Specimen, the monster who killed and ate Stain. Dabi, the monster? You mean the one that killed all those heroes in that hero agency? Shigaraki, and trust me when I say that you don't want to fight him, because if you do he will kill you and eat your body afterwards, and now that you know that, Specimen, return. 4. Deku remove his hands from around their necks and let them drop to their knees on the ground. After doing so, he then goes back to the stool he was sitting on. One seated, Kurogiri placed his plate of food down right in front of him, which made the shell go away as he grabs the steaming steak with his own hands and begins eating it. Shigaraki, now, are you going to join or not? Dabi and Toga takes one look at each other and look back at Shigaraki, where they then nodded their head in approval. Shigaraki, good, we'll contact you once we have something planned, now get out of my sight. So Dabi and Toga get up from the ground and begin stepping out of the room, but as Toga was stepping out the door, she took one more glance at Deku and smiled. After a month passed, summer vacation was beginning to start, which meant the students of the hero course were going to head to a training camp in the mountains. Knowing this, Shigaraki prepared a plan for the new members of the League of Villains. Once Shigaraki had his plan ready, he had Kurogiri contact all of the new members of the League of Villains. As soon as all the new members of the villains were gathered in the bar of the hideouts, Shigaraki entered the room and sat on a stool, where he then looked at each and every new member of the League of Villains. 1. Shigaraki, I have to say your numbers aren't that great, but that doesn't mean I doubt your quirks. I had gathered you all here today for a plan I have prepared, and it involves the students of UA. Hearing this, the League members grew interested in his plan. But there was one that wasn't really paying attention, and that was Himiko Toga, who was wondering where the monster is since he wasn't with Shigaraki. But she also noticed that Kurogiri wasn't with him as well. Seeing that the two of them are not with him, Toga guesses that they have to be somewhere else in the building, so without anyone noticing her presence, she began making her way to the door that Shigaraki came out of earlier. As soon as she reached the door, she began to open it wide enough for her slide inside. After doing this, she quietly shut the door behind her and began making her way through a hallway where she began looking for the monster. Toga, now where could you be? As Toga continued walking through the hallways, she stopped at each door she saw and checked inside but didn't find Deku in any of them, which began to frustrate her. Toga, where is he? I've been looking for him for at least a couple minutes and I can't find him anywhere. Suddenly Toga then heard the sound of a creaking door up ahead around a corner. So she made her way over there and began peeking from the corner. From doing so, she saw Kurogiri stepping out of the room and shutting the door. As he did this, he suddenly turned his head over towards the direction where Toga is peeking at. But he didn't see her due to her quickly pulling her head back from the corner. After that happened, he brushed it off and began walking towards the direction where Toga was. As soon as he turned the corner, he did not see anyone there, so he continued walking through the hallway to get to the door that led into the bar. As soon as you got far enough though, a door suddenly opens, which Toga peeks head and sees Kurogiri walking towards the direction of the bar. Seeing this, she got out of the room she was hiding in and walked around the corner, where she then made her way to the door that Kurogiri out of. Toga, he has to be in here, I know it. Toga placed her left hand onto the knob of the door, which she then pulls down and slowly begins opening it. As she did this, she peeked inside and immediately saw Deku, who was curled up on the bed sleeping. Seeing him, Toga smiled as she opened the door wide enough for her to step inside. Once inside, she shut the door and made her way to his bed, where she then stood by and looked down as he slept. Toga's mind, he looks so cute when he's sleeping, but I bet he could look even more cuter if he was covered in his own blood. 2. As she said that, a knife suddenly comes out of her right sleeve from her sweater. She then raises the knife up above her head and was ready to plunge it down towards him, but before she could, she suddenly heard him speak. Deku, Mom. 1. Toga, Mom. As Toga repeated what he said, Deku's left hand suddenly grabbed her right wrist, surprising her, and while looking at him, she sees his head turn towards her, until she sees his gentle-looking eyes turn into a menacing glare, which he then got off the bed and tackled her to the ground. From doing this, he had her pinned to the ground as he had his hands wrapped around both of her wrists, and she was pinned to the ground. Deku began growling at her, but instead of being scared, Toga just looks at him. Toga, hey, it's okay. See. Toga then lets go of her knife, making it slide off her hand and onto the ground. Seeing this, Deku loosens his grip around her wrist but still has her pinned to the ground. But as he had her pinned, he began to smell something sweet which he has never really smelled before. And due to this, his once angry face suddenly turned into curiosity due to the sweet smell. So as he continued sniffing, he noticed that the smell was coming from Toga, so he leans in close to her neck, where he then began to sniff her neck, and enjoying her sweet scent. But as he did this, Toga suddenly began giggling, which made Deku pull his head away from her neck and look at it. As he did so, he saw her smiling, which reminded him of that large man from that book Shigaraki destroyed. Toga, hee, that tickled. Deku, tickled. Toga, yeah, you tickled me because you begin smelling me. Hearing that, Deku went ahead and began sniffing Toga's neck again, making a giggle some more. 2. Toga, hee, okay, you can stop now, hee. Deku did as she said and stopped sniffing her. He even let go of her wrist and got off of her as well. As he did that, Toga sat up and looked at Deku with a smile, which he attempted to imitate by just showing his teeth. Seeing this makes Toga a giggle even more. Toga, hee, you know you're really funny, I like you. Deku, like. Toga, yeah, I like you a lot, so could I have some of you blood? Hearing this, Deku didn't know what like was, but knew that she wanted blood. So he grabs a cup full of pencils, which he then spills to the ground. After doing so, he placed the cup down in front of him, where he then hovers his left hand above it and begins to cut through the palm with his right finger. From doing that, blood begins flowing from the cut and dripping into the cup. Once enough blood was in the cup, the cut on the palm of his hand began to heal rapidly. Once his hand was fully healed, he grabbed the cup filled with his blood and began to hand it over to Toga. Deku, blood. Toga smiles from this and takes the cup. Toga, thank you. As Toga began to move her lips towards the rim of the cup, Deku immediately figured out that she was going to drink it, so before her lips could touch the rim he placed his left hand over the cup, which made her stop and look over at him. Deku, no drink. Blood is bad. Deku takes the cup away from her and spilled it onto the ground. From doing so, Toga sees that his blood is completely black and is steaming as well. Seeing this, Toga is glad that Deku stopped her from drinking his blood. Toga, thank you for doing that. If I did drink that, I would have been poisoned or something. Right after Toga said that, Deku scooched up closer to her, invading her personal space, but she didn't really mind at all. Deku, what is name? Toga, it's Himiko Toga, but you can just call me Toga. Deku, Toga, Toga, yep, that's me. Now what's your name? Deku, Specimen. Toga, Specimen, well, that sounds like a boring name. How about I give you a nickname instead? Deku, a nickname. Toga, yeah, it's a special name that only I can call you by, so would you like me to give you one? Deku responds to Toga's question with a simple nod. Toga, okay, then how about I call you Beastie? 5. Deku, Beastie. Toga, that's right, from here on out I'll start calling you Beastie, and to thank Beastie for stopping me drinking your blood, I'll give you a little treat. Toga reaches into the right pocket of her sweater, who she then takes out a wrapped up piece of candy, and present it to Deku, who looks at it with curiosity. Toga, it candy. Deku, candy. Toga, that's right, you eat it. Hearing this, Deku begins to open his mouth and attempted to bite down onto the candy, but before he could, Toga pulled it away from him before could. Toga, whoa, you can't eat the candy with the wrapper still on. So Toga then proceeded to unwrap the candy for him. After doing so, she held it in between his thumb and finger. Toga, okay, open wide. As she said that, Deku opened his mouth up widely. Toga then went ahead and tossed the candy into his mouth, which he then closed and began tasting the candy in his mouth. From doing so, his eyes lit up from the taste of the sweet candy. Toga, do you like it? Deku shakes his head in a rapid motion to respond back to Toga, which she is happy to see. Toga, hee, that's good to know. While Deku was savoring the candy in his mouth, Toga raised her left hand and began touching his soft green hair. Toga, Beastie is really cute, but I wonder why he said mom in his sleep. Suddenly the door to Deku's room opens, which makes Deku and Toga look over towards the door and see Kurogiri. Kurogiri, I knew that I'll find you here. Seeing him, Toga begins to feel a bit worried, so she glanced over towards her right to the ground. What she sees her knife, but before she can attempt to grab it, Deku suddenly wraps his arms around her and look back at Kurogiri. Deku, Kurogiri, I like Toga. Hearing him say that makes her cheeks blush. Kurogiri, well, it's nice that you made a friend, Specimen, but now the two of you get up. Tamura needs to speak to the both of you. Hearing that, they both got up from the ground and began heading to the bar together. Once there, Tamura saw them together, and instead of being angry at her for leaving all of a sudden, he just tells her the rest of his plan, which also involves Deku. After informing the both of them, Shigaraki introduces Deku as a monster named Specimen to the other league members, who are not quite convinced that he is the monster that they heard so much about, but Toga and Dabi inform them that he is, and not to mess with him at all. Hearing that, they took them by their word. After that, Kurogiri opened the giant portal behind the league members, which they then walked through. As Deku and Toga walked up to the portal, Deku stared back at Shigaraki. Shigaraki, Specimen, make sure to kill anyone that tries to harm you. 4. After hearing that, Deku walks through the portal with Toga, leaving the league hideout. As weeks passed, Deku spent a lot of time with the new Vanguard Action Squad. Some of them kept their distance away from him, but a few got closer to him. Especially Toga, who kept teaching him new things and even giving him candy time to time. But as he was with everyone there, he couldn't help but to feel a presence similar to his. So once everyone went to sleep, Deku began searching the entire area until eventually he reached a giant metal door which was chained shut. As he puts his ear against the door, he hears heavy breathing on the other side. So he grabbed the lock to the chains and rips it off with his strength. After doing so, he pushes the door wide open, letting light shine into the room. From doing so he looks ahead and sees a Nomu chained against the wall. As Deku began approaching the Nomu slowly, he began to see multiple chainsaws connected to its body, but most noticeably was a mask covering its eyes. As he was getting closer and closer to it though, the Nomu suddenly sensed Deku's presence, which makes it lunged itself straight at Deku, but as it did that the chains prevent it to get any closer to Deku. Seeing this, Deku is unfazed of what it was trying to do. Instead he gets a bit closer until eventually he was face to face with the chainsaw Nomu. Looking up at it, he raises his right hand up and places it on the visor of the mask. Doing this, the Nomu begins calming down until eventually it got on its knees and looked at Deku. Deku, it's okay now. Saying those words to the Nomu, it begins about its head to Deku, but as it did so Deku then heard footsteps behind him, so he immediately turned around and saw Dabi approaching him. Dabi, hey, what the hell are you doing here? As he was doing so, Chainsaw Nomu suddenly rose up and lunged itself once more. Seeing it do this, Dabi reaches into his right pocket of his coat and pulls out a control, which he then presses a button, which sends a large shock through the Nomu's head, making it fall to the ground and passing out. As Deku saw this, he began to feel bad for the Nomu who got hurt. Dabi, hey monster, I asked you a question earlier, do you mind answering it? Deku, why? Dabi, huh, Deku, why hurt Nomu? Dabi, because it's a wild animal and wild animals need to know its place. 2. Deku, am I a wild animal? Dabi, to be completely honest with you, I don't know what you are. It raises the question on if you're a human or a monster. Hearing that, Deku looks at the Chainsaw Nomu, and sees his reflection through the visor of his mask. As he looked at himself he didn't know what he was. Deku, what am I? 5. Dabi, that's something for you to figure out. 2. As Dabi said that, he saw Deku get on his knees in front of the Chainsaw Nomu, which began to regain consciousness, so instead of pressing the button again to make it fall unconscious, he puts the control back into his pocket and begins to walk away, to level Deku with the Nomu. When she was out of the room he shut the door behind him and began making his way back to everyone else, but as he did so he bumped into Toga, who was looking for Deku. Toga, oh hey there Dabi, have you seen Beastie around? Instead of telling her the truth of where he is at the moment, he lies instead. Dabi, no I haven't. Toga, aw really? If that's the case I better keep on looking. As Toga ran past Dabi, he quickly turned around and grabbed her by the shoulder, making her stop and turn towards him. Toga, what's up? Dabi, have a quick question for you. Toga, oh okay, shoot. Dabi, what do you think Specimen is? Toga, huh? That's a weird question, he's our friend of course. Dabi, if that's what you think, then I don't need to hear anything else. Toga, okay, bye. 1. Toga then ran off to look for Deku. As she did that, Dabi then proceeded to head back to the others, but on his way there he began questioning if Deku was either a human or a monster. A week later, after a week has passed, Shigaraki has sent supplies to everyone in the Vanguard Action Squad, which meant it was time for them to leave the warehouse they were hiding in. So as everyone grabbed their new equipment they headed through a portal that Kurogiri opened for them from a distance. After everyone stepped through the portal they found themselves in a forest, which was a new experience for Deku, so without any thinking he ran through the forest freely, making everyone worried. Twice. Damn it, where's he going? Run Specimen, run. 4. Mr. Compress. If he goes too far then someone will spot him and our mission will be. Dabi, right, let's go after him. So everyone in the Vanguard Action Squad began running to the direction Deku ran off to, but since he ran on all fours they couldn't catch up to him at all. And after he ran off completely they lost sight of him, so they all split it up to find where he's gone. After a couple minutes of Toga soon found him standing on a ledge on the side of the hill. Toga, Beastie. Hearing his nickname, Deku turns his head around to Toga approaching him. Deku, Toga. As soon as Toga got close, she quickly grabbed him by the hand and pulled him away from the leg so he wouldn't fall off. After she did that she began pulling him along to bring him back to the others. But while she was doing so Deku looked towards the direction of the ledge and saw a building just ahead. But that's not the only thing, he even smelled a large amount of people there. But out of all the people's scent he smelled, there was one that had a particular scent on them, but he didn't know who was it. As just a few short days passed, the Vanguard Action Squad were ready to start their attack upon the camp once night came. So as everyone begins suiting up in their new equipment they received, Dobby noticed that Muscular wasn't with them. To Dobby. Damn it, he's gone again. Hey Twice, do you know where Muscular ran off to? Twice, sorry, no clue. Probably chickened out and ran off. Dobby. Sigh. You're no help. So as Dobby looked at everyone else to see who might know where Muscular has gone off to, he soon looked over at the cliff's edge where Deku was standing. He goes overtime and ends up standing right next to him. From doing so he sees that Deku is just staring out to the forest that they'll be heading into soon. Dobby. You see anything out there, specimen? Deku. No, but I smell. Dobby. What do you smell? Deku. A lot of people. Dobby. Could Muscular be amongst those people? Deku. Yes. Dobby. Tisk. That idiot. Specimen, I need you to do something. Deku. What is it? Dobby. Go find Muscular, now. Hearing his order, Deku's shell quirk immediately covered his face. After doing so he then jumped off the cliff and into the trees down below. From him doing this, the others saw this, so Toga runs over towards Dobby to see why Deku left. Toga. Hey, where's Beastie going? Dobby. I had him go find Muscular. Toga. Ah, if that was the case I should have just gone with him. Dobby. No, he's much faster on his own, and if you're gone with him you would have just slowed him down, plus you have an important role, remember. Toga. Yeah, I know, but still I hope Beastie will be okay. Daddy. He'll be just fine. Right after Dobby said that Twice sooner posting from behind. Twice. Yo Dobby, everybody's ready to go. Dobby. Good, now let's go get what we came here for. So as the Vanguard Action Squad were ready to head into the forest. Deku was already far ahead of them as he used the tree branches to move around faster. As he did this he was getting closer and closer to the campgrounds where all the heroes in training are at. And as soon as he began to get closer and closer he began to pick up Muscular scent more clearly. So he began to follow the direction where his scent is. But while heading towards that direction he suddenly picked up another scent which was far too familiar. So he stopped while hiding inside the branches of a tree. Doing so he begins to sniff the air. From doing so he picks up the familiar scent which was heading towards his direction. So while hiding in the branches he looked towards the direction where the scent is coming from and saw a blonde boy with spiky hair walking next to another boy with red and white hair. As Deku looked at them, he knew the scent was coming off of the blonde boy but didn't know who he was. So in the branches of the tree and just observed them. Bakugo. Damn it, I still can't believe I got stuck with you in this stupid test, your courage. Todoroki. I'm not too happy about it either, but you don't see me complaining. As the two of them continued walking through the dirt path, Todoroki suddenly stopped and looked up at the tree on his left. Bakugo notices that Todoroki is not walking beside him anymore, so turned around and sees him looking up at the tree. Bakugo. Hey, I see hot, why the hell did you stop walking? Todoroki. I have a strange feeling. Bakugo. What type of feeling? Todoroki. The one that we're being watched. As Bakugo heard that, he looked over at Todoroki with confusion. Bakugo. What the hell are you on about? Todoroki. Up there to that tree. Bakugo goes ahead and looks up at the same tree that Todoroki is looking up at. Boy, looking up at it he did not see a single thing, so he looked back at Todoroki. Bakugo. There's nothing up there, now come on, we're wasting enough time in this stupid test. Once that was said, Todoroki looked away from the tree and began walking alongside with Bakugo again. Once the boss is in my far enough away, Deku dropped down from the tree they were looking at and looked towards the direction they walked off to. He had the temptation to go follow them but remembered the order that Dobby gave him, so he continued following Muscular scent. After a minute or so he soon reached a side of a cliff. Deku looked up at the cliff and knew that Muscular was up there since his scent was the most strongest up there. So Deku used his claws to climb up the side of the cliff, but while Deku was climbing the cliff, Muscular was confronting a little boy on top of the cliff. Muscular. Hey there kid. There's no need to be scared of me, I'm not going to hurt you, unless you give me a reason to. The little boy is so scared of Muscular that he can't even take a single step back. Muscular notices death and still approaches him anyway. As soon as he was beginning to get closer to the boy, he grabbed his cloak that he was wearing and removed it, which he then tossed to the side. From him doing so the boy's eyes widened as he knew who he was. Yo, you're him. The man who killed my parents. Hearing that, Muscular stops approaching the boy. Instead he leans a bit closer to get a better look at him. From now getting a better look at him he soon remembers 2 heroes that he killed. Muscular. No way. You're there, kid? Saying that he then began laughing maniacally as he was now confronting the child of those 2 heroes. Muscular. Out of all the people I bump into here, it has to be you, a little kid whose parents I killed. Haha. You know your parents weren't all that strong, but they did manage to take my left eye, which completely pissed me off. But after taking their lives I still wasn't satisfied with my revenge, so what better way to satisfy it than to kill the snot-headed brat of those heroes. After Muscular said that, he then reached into his pocket and pulled out an artificial eye. From doing this he then uses his quirk that makes raw muscle wrap around his entire arms. Muscular. Now kid, let me reunite you with mommy and daddy. Muscular then launches his left straight towards the boy. From him doing this the boy closes his eyes and waits for the impact of his fist, but after just a few seconds he didn't feel the punch at all. He opened his eyes and saw someone else standing in between of him and Muscular's fist. Muscular. What are you doing here, little monster? Deku. Dobby ordered me to find you. Muscular. Well, you found me, now get lost, I have some unfinished business here. As Muscular said that, Deku looked over his shoulder and saw the scared little boy. After doing so he then looks back at the Muscular. Deku. I don't care, so either get out of my way or get hurt. Deku doesn't move from the spot he's standing at, which frustrates Muscular. Muscular. Fine. Have it your way. Suddenly Muscular grabbed Deku by his throat with his left hand. After doing so he turns around and slams him into the ground. He lets go of Deku's neck and looks down at. From doing this he sees him beginning to sit himself up. But before he could, Muscular immediately stopped him by punching him into the ground with his right fist, but even after doing that he then saw his right arm move, so Muscular begins sending a barrage of punches straight at Deku. As he did this for at least a couple minutes, the only thing you heard were crushed bones and blood splatter. After that he soon stopped and looked down at Deku once more, whose body was completely destroyed from all those punches. Muscular. And you're supposed to be some sort of monster. What a joke. After he said those words you turned around to face the boy again. Muscular. Now where were we? As began to approach the boy while cracking his knuckles, he didn't know that Deku was beginning to regenerate all of his injuries, but while he was regenerating, he began to remember the words that Shigaraki told him. Shigaraki, specimen, make sure you kill anyone that tries to harm you. From remembering those words, Deku stands right back up on his feet and begins repeating a single word. Deku. Kill. 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 As Deku continued repeating this word, Muscular turned around to see Deku looking unharmed and back on his own 2 feet. Deku. Kill. 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 Muscular, what the hell? Without wasting any time Deku got on all fours and began rushing straight towards Muscular. As he was getting close, Muscular raised his right fist up and slammed it down once Deku's was under it. But from doing so he then felt the muscle on his arm tear. Once the dust cleared he saw that his punch didn't hit Deku at all. Instead he saw a large amount of his muscles teared open. Deku. Kill. Hearing that from behind him, Muscular quickly turned around and saw Deku standing there with his claws out, but as he looked at his claws he noticed that there was some of his muscle stuck to the tips of his sharp claws. Muscular's mind. When I punched the ground I thought I hit him, but it seems I was wrong. He must dodged it and cut the muscles around my arm. I bet even after doing that he slid in between my legs and got behind me. I have to be careful with him, if I mess up I'm bound to be killed. Deku gets on all fours again and begins rushing straight towards Muscular once more. This time as he gets closer Muscular puts his arms up and launches his left fist straight towards him, but as his fist was getting closer to Deku, he dodges it just in time. From doing this he also raises his right hand up and sinks his sharp claws into his muscle that he then tears open. As he did this Muscular lets out a loud scream of pain. But while he screamed out of pain Deku who raised his right hand up and launched it straight towards Muscular's stomach, but as his claws were getting closer, Muscular was quick to act, so he puts his right arm in front of his stomach which Deku stabbed into with his claws, but as his claws were in deep in his muscle, he couldn't pull them out, so he raised his left hand to try to rip the muscles that had his right hand stuck, but before he can do that Muscular grabs onto his right arm. Muscular. No, there's no way for you to escape. Right as Muscular said that, Shell opens its jaw and bites down onto the muscle that has his right arm trapped. Doing this, he then rips out a large chunk of muscle which allows him to pull out his hand and the cut Muscular's left hand, making him let go of his right arm. After this happens, Muscular didn't have time to make more muscles, since Deku got so close that he began swiping his claws left and right, tearing through the muscle of his arms that he used to block his own body. And before Muscular knew it, all the muscle around his arm were soon tear it open, revealing his bare skin, which Deku didn't waste time to sink his claws into. As Muscular screamed out of pain from the sharp claws piercing through his skin of his arms, Deku grabbed hold of a bone in each arm and pulled them out. Doing this, Muscular wasn't able to move his arms again. After doing that, Deku then pounces on top of them. As Muscular looked up at Deku, there was fear in his eye as he saw him raising his left would you then plunge downwards into his chest. Doing this, Deku then rips out his heart from his chest, which immediately kills Muscular. Now that he was dead, Deku raised Muscular's heart above his head and looked up. He then squeezed it, releasing all the blood contained in the heart, which he then opened his mouth widely to drink it. After doing so, he then tosses the remain of his heart away and begins tearing open Muscular's chest and eating his insides. But while he feasted on Muscular's corpse, the boy was just standing there horrified what he was seeing. Not wanting to be killed and eating like that villain, he stepped back, but from doing so he stepped on the twig which snacked and grabbed Deku's attention, so he leaps into the air and lands right in front of the boys. We then falls to the ground and looks up at Deku. As the boy was on the ground, Deku squatted down and just stared right back at him. 1. P please. D don't hurt me. Suddenly Deku presses his right finger against the boy's chest. Deku. Name. 3. Kota. It's Kota. Deku. Kota. Deku then removed his finger from Kota's chest and wiped off some blood from his mouth, and she then used to paint a smile across his face. After doing so, Deku gets back up and goes back to Muscular's where he can continue eating him. As he did this, Kota took this opportunity to get back up and run away. As the Vanguard Action Squad began their attack on the camp, Deku was still eating parts of Muscular's corpse, but once he had his full, he walked away from his core and made his way to the edge of the cliff. As Deku looked out to the forest, he began to sniff the air. Doing so, he immediately caught the scent of Bakugo and a few others towards his direction. So he jumps off the cliff and land into the trees, where he then began running on the branches. Doing this, he began to hear many voices from either the Vanguard Action Squad or the heroes. But he didn't really pay attention to that. Instead, he was only focused on finding Bakugo. Not because of the mission, but instead for the reason why his scent is so familiar. Eventually, after running through the trees, he soon arrived where Bakugo's scent coming from. As Deku looked out to the dark forest, he didn't see him. So he sniffed the air again and soon located Bakugo, who's hiding behind the tree. Knowing where he is, he jumps off the tree branch and onto the ground. But before Deku could take a single step towards the tree that Bakugo is hiding behind, he was suddenly stabbed through the back by multiple sharp objects that even bursted through his chest so it can hit the ground. From that happening, Deku looks down at his chest and stomach and see the sharp objects that pierced right through him, and before he knew it, the objects slid out of his back, making him fall to the ground. As he laid on the ground, he turned his head over towards his left and looked over his shoulder, but he then saw Moonfish, another villain part of the Vanguard Action Squad. Moonfish, I got one of you. Since his eyes were covered, he had no clue that he harmed Deku, so as the wounds quickly healed, Deku stood right back on his feet. Doing this, he grabs Moonfish's attention. Moonfish, you're back up. Well, I'll make sure you won't get back up this time. As 4 of Moonfish's teeth began to head straight towards Deku, he was quick to act and dodged all 4 of the teeth. Doing so, he then swiped his claws at the teeth, which he broke all for an impact. From those part of his teeth breaking, he soon lost balance and began to fall to the ground. Once Moonfish hit the ground, a piece of fabric that was covering his eyes suddenly rips open. As he raises his head to look up, he soon sees Deku looking down at him. Moonfish, specimen, what are you doing here? I thought you went to go find Muscular. 2. As Moonfish continued looking up at him, he soon noticed some blood on the sharp teeth of Deku's shell, seeing that he suspects the worst. Moonfish, specimen, did you, Deku, kill? Hearing that, Moonfish began to open his mouth so he can use his quirk, but before he could, Deku grabbed onto the top part of his head with his right hand and sinked his claws through his skin and into his skull. Doing so, he then cleanly ripped off his head without using that much strength. As he did this, Bakugo and Todoroki saw this as they hid behind a tree. They were completely horrified to see him just rip off his head with no effort. 1. Bakugo. Hey, icy hot, what the hell is that? Todoroki. I don't know, but I don't think it's on our side. Bakugo. And what the hell are we going to do? Todoroki. I don't know. As Todoroki peeked his head from the tree, he looked over at Deku, who suddenly turned his head over towards him. As he did this, Todoroki quickly pulled his head back behind the tree. Todoroki. I think it saw me. Bakugo. What? As Bakugo said that, the head of Moonfish was then tossed over towards their direction. They've been suddenly heard footsteps coming their way. Bakugo. Shit, he's coming our way. Todoroki. Yeah, I know, and I have an idea. Bakugo. Well, whatever the hell it is, it better work. So as Bakugo and Todoroki began to put their plan into action, Deku was getting close to them, but as soon as he looked past the trees they were hiding behind, he did not see them there at all, so it begins to sniff the air, but before he can grab their scent, Deku suddenly felt both of his feet get cold, so he looked down at his feet and saw that they were trapped in ice. Todoroki. Bakugo now. As Todoroki said that, Deku looked over his shoulder and saw Bakugo jump out from behind the tree and shoot him with an explosion straight to his back, but that wasn't enough. Bakugo went ahead and sent a barrage of explosions straight at Deku. Bakugo. Die. 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 As Bakugo kept shooting Deku with a barrage of explosions, he soon broke free from the ice around his feet and jumped up into the trees. Doing so, Bakugo and Todoroki lost sight of him. Bakugo. Damn it, he got away. Todoroki. No, it's still here. Right as he said that, Deku jumped out from the trees and was behind Todoroki. Bakugo. I see hot behind you. As Todoroki began to turn his body towards his right, he raised his arm and opened the palm of his hand so he can freeze Deku, but before you can even do so, Deku grabbed his wrist and bent it the other way around, making the bone pop out, and also making him scream out pain. After doing so, Deku then side-kicked Todoroki on his stomach so hard that he ended up hitting a trunk of a tree. Once he fell to the ground, he was now completely unconscious. Bakugo. You damn bastard. Bakugo aimed both hands straight at Deku and let out a large explosion at him. But after the explosion, Deku soon came out of the smoke and began swiping his claws straight at Bakugo, who was doing his best to dodge them. But while doing so, he also let out explosions straight at him as well. But with each explosion he launched at Deku, he easily recovered from it, but Bakugo did not stop at all, until he raised his left hand up to shoot out another explosion. The right one, the explosion was about to go off, it suddenly stopped due to his hand hurting. I'm overusing his quirk. Bakugo. Damn it, not now. Right after he said those words, Deku grabbed Bakugo by the neck and pinned him against a tree, painting against the tree. Bakugo. You damn freak, I'll kill you. Deku. Kill, kill, kill. Deku's grip was then began to get tighter around Bakugo's neck. As he was beginning to struggle to breathe, he raised his right hand in front of Deku's face. Bakugo. Eat this. And with one last explosion, Deku was then blasted away from Bakugo. After Bakugo did that, he began to regain his breath until eventually he started to make his way straight over towards Deku. But as he was approaching, he saw that he was trying to pick himself up. So he aimed his right hand at him to give him another explosion, but before he did, he heard him speak. Deku. That hurt. As Deku said that, Bakugo had a familiar voice that he hadn't heard for such a long time. Suddenly in that very moment, Deku turned his head to look over at Bakugo, and doing so, it is shown on right side of his shell has been completely blown off, and was now revealing his hair and half of his face, which Bakugo was shocked to see. Bakugo. Aizuku. Before he can process this moment, Bakugo suddenly disappeared in front of Deku's very eyes, but looked down, he saw a blue marble on the ground which was being picked up by Mr. Compress. Mr. Compress. Good job, specimen, you let him put his guard down. Compress puts the marble in his pocket and goes over towards Deku and lends him hand up. Mr. Compress. Well, it seems that we got what we came here for. Now let us leave, shall we? Deku responds by nodding his head. After doing so, the both of them then leave to head to the area where they'll be getting picked up by Kurogiri, but on the way there Deku kept wondering why Bakugo call him Izuku. After successfully capturing Bakugo, Deku and the remaining Vanguard Action Squad met at their meeting point earlier than expected, so Dabi contacted Kurogiri to open up the portals for them. After doing so, the portals then appeared, which everyone then began walking through. Once they were all on the other side, they noticed that they were all back in the bar where Shigaraki and Kurogiri were there to greet them. Shigaraki: well, you're back earlier than on schedule. Dabi: well, it's all thanks to Specimen that we're back so early. Mr. Compress: he's right. Compress says that as he then tosses the marble in his right hand over towards Shigaraki, which he then grabs it in midair and holds it up at the light in between two fingers. Doing so, he sees Bakugo trapped inside the marble. Shigaraki: well, you did an excellent job after all, but could someone explain to me where are the other three who are missing? Daddy glances over at Deku, knowing that he found Muscular but didn't bring him back as told, but instead of saying anything he remains quiet about that subject. Dabi: if they're not here, then it's of course, they didn't make it. Shigaraki: well, if that's the case, then it doesn't matter now. What does matter is that we try to convince this kid to switch to our side. But before we do that, I bet a lot of you are tired from your little mission, so go get some rest. Hearing that, everyone began to head to their rooms, but as Deku was walking with the others, he was then grabbed on his right shoulder by Kurogiri. From this happening, he stopped walking, but everyone else continued leaving the room until it was only Deku, Shigaraki, and Kurogiri in the room. Shigaraki: Specimen, come here. Deku does as he is told and goes over towards Shigaraki. Doing so, he stands there and looks at Shigaraki as he has a glass of liquor in his right hand. Shigaraki: so Specimen, did you enjoy your mission? Deku: yes. Shigaraki: good, good. No, answer me this, did you kill tonight? Deku: yes. Shigaraki: how many? Deku: 2. Shigaraki: by any chance, were those 2 villains? Deku: yes. Shigaraki: as the reason why you killed them was because they attacked you? Deku: yes. Shigaraki: then that means there's nothing to worry about since you did as I told you to do. No, go get some rest, you deserve it. 4. Deku: okay. Deku then proceed to leave the bar and head back to his room. Days later, as the days passed, word about Bakugo's kidnapping by the League of Villains were broadcasted everywhere, which meant many people were going against the teachers of UA for not protecting them on students. So the teachers responsible for the hero course students went on TV to explain themselves in this entire situation. During that same time, Shigaraki and all of the other villains were gathered in the bar where Bakugo was. He was strapped to a chair and had braces covering his hands so he doesn't use his quirk. As he was like this, Shigaraki tried convincing Bakugo to join up with the League of Villains. Shigaraki: so what do you say, kid, would you like to join? Shigaraki stopped halfway through a sentence, due to hearing hand claps behind him, so he turned around and saw Toga teaching Deku how to play patty cake. 4. Shigaraki: would you stop that, can't you see we're trying to do something important? 2. Toga: yeah, and so are we. 1. Shigaraki: no, you're not, you're just being annoying, so stop it and don't teach Specimen stupid things like that. Toga: sigh, Finn, we'll stop. Shigaraki: you better. During their little argument, Bakugo looked over at Specimen Deku, but couldn't see his face due to him facing away from him and having his hoodie up as well, but as he looked at him he couldn't help but to remember what he saw back at the camp. Bakugo's mind: no, it can't be, it has to be someone else that looks like that as well. Shigaraki: now, like I was saying. Hearing that, Bakugo stopped what he was thinking, and looks back at Shigaraki. Shigaraki: would you like to join the League of Villain, kid? Bakugo: how about you go screw yourself and your league? Shigaraki: I see. Dabi, take him out of that chair. Dabi: what? Shigaraki: we have to make him equal compared to us, so let him out of that chair. Dabi: twice you do it, twice. Okay. What? Tamura told you to do it. Dabi: now I'm telling you, so do it. Twice. Sigh, Finn. So as Bakugo saw twice heading his way, he quickly thought of a plan to get out of this place. Bakugo's mind: as soon as that bastard gets me out of this chair, I'm going to blow my way out of here. But before Twice could get any closer, Deku got off his chair and began approaching Bakugo himself, which everyone saw, and made Twice stop walking. As soon as Deku got close to Bakugo, he began sniffing the air and soon found out something was going on, which made him begin to growl. Bakugo looked up at him but still couldn't see his entire face due to the hoodie covering half of it. Bakugo's mind. Damn it, does this thing know about my plan? As Deku kept growling at Bakugo, he then quickly leaned towards him. Doing this, his hoodie comes off of him, letting Bakugo finally see the full face of Specimen, who he was shocked to see. Bakugo, it's you, Izuku. Hearing that name again, Deku stopped his growling and looks as Bakugo with confusion. Bakugo, Izuku, it's me, your childhood friend. We used to play together when we were younger. Even explaining this, Deku was still confused on what he was talking about. Shigaraki, all right, that's enough. Specimen, come back. Hearing Shigaraki's orders, Deku steps away from Bakugo and begins to head back to the stool he was sitting on, but as he was walking away, Bakugo kept everything about Deku. Bakugo, Izuku, don't you remember? You live with your mom, Inko Midoriya, who loves and cares about you, and is waiting for you to come home. Hearing this, Deku stops walking but doesn't turn around to Bakugo. Bakugo, come on Izuku, remember, you used to call me by that nickname you gave me, Kachan. Deku, Kachan. Bakugo, yes, that's right, and I gave you a nickname too, and that was Deku. Hearing that name, Deku goes ahead and turned back towards Bakugo, but doing so, she suddenly heard something behind the door that Spinner is standing next to, so he raises his right arm and points at the door. Doing this, everyone looks towards the door and suddenly hears a knock. Question mark. Pizza delivery. 4. Hearing this, everyone but Deku grows confused, but suddenly they turn back Deku, who then uses his shell quirk to cover his face, which everyone knew if he did that meant there was danger, but before they can act, the brick wall suddenly bursted into and they hear a familiar word said by a familiar person. All Might. Smash. The villains close to the wall get hit by the debris, while the others stepped back and get ready to fight, but before they could, branches suddenly come out from behind All Might and wrap around everyone. Shigaraki. Damn it, Kurogiri, right. As Kurogiri attempted to expand his body of mist, an old small man quickly enters the room and hits Kurogiri behind his head, knocking him out. The old man does the same with Dabi as well, who attempted to use his flames to burn the wood. With everyone wrapped up in the branches including Deku, he noticed All Might and remembered him from that book. Seeing All Might stand a few feet away from him, all he did was just stare with wide open eyes. All Might, no need to worry now, young Bakugo, we are here to rescue you. All Might says that as he begins to release Bakugo from the chair. Once you release, he got back on his feet and looked over at Deku, who was focusing on All Might. Bakugo, Izuku. Hearing that name again, Deku changes his focus over towards Bakugo. Bakugo, what did they do to you? All Might, young Bakugo, do you know that person? Bakugo, yes I do, he was my old friend, Izuku Midoriya. All Might, I see, too. As Deku looked at Bakugo and All Might, he suddenly began to hear Toga in pain. He looked towards his right and saw her wrapped up with branches that were squeezing her too tightly. Seeing this enrages him, so he looks back at All Might with anger for hurting his friend, so using all of his strength he breaks free from the branches. The old man sees this and quickly hits his direction to knock him out like Kurogiri and Dabi, but as soon as he was about to kick the back of his head, Deku quickly noticed his presence and turned around and grabbed his leg. After doing so, he then threw him into the shelves of the bar. All Might, Gran Torino. As All Might yelled that out, more branches came out from the hole in the wall, and went straight towards Deku, but as they got close, Deku easily sliced them in half. After doing so, he then sliced the branch that had Toga trapped. He even sliced the branch that had Shigaraki trapped as well. Shigaraki, thank you Specimen, now kill them all. Hearing those orders, Deku was willing to obey to them, but before you can take a single step forward, black goo suddenly came out of his mouth until it fully consumes him. As Shigaraki saw this, he then began to see the others experience the same thing, and even saw Bakugo experience it as well. Seeing all this, Shigaraki finally knew what was going on. 4. Shigaraki, it seems that my master has come to my aid. As Shigaraki said that, the black goose suddenly came out of his mouth as well. All Might reached out to stop him, but it was too late. The goo fully consumed him and took him away along with the others. All Might, no. All Might scram out for failing the mission to save Bakugo and stop the League of Villains. As Bakugo regained consciousness from what just happened, he noticed that he was on the ground, so he picks himself up. Doing this, he sees the League of Villains getting up from the ground as well, but two are still unconscious from being knocked out earlier at the bar. As he looked at the rest of the league, though, he did not see Deku anywhere, but before Bakugo can wonder where Deku has gone, he suddenly feels a dark aura. He looks ahead and sees the man named All for One. Shigaraki, Master. As All for One stood on top of some rubble, he looked down at Shigaraki and at his newly informed league. All for One, Tamura, it seems that I had to get you out of trouble once again. Shigaraki, apologies Master, if it wasn't for that damn All Might, then none of this would have happened. All for One, it is fine Tamura, I'm just glad that I saved you and your fellow comrades as well. Feeling grateful, Shigaraki bowed his head to All for One, but as he did this he heard Toga calling out Deku's nickname. Toga, beastie, where are? Hearing her call out to him, Shigaraki began looking around the area for him as well. But there was no sight of him, so he turns back to All for One to ask where he is, but before he can open his mouth he suddenly heard multiple things hit the ground behind him, so he turns around along with everyone else there. Doing this, they see 4 students of UA on the ground, and standing before them were a group of smaller Nomu, but standing in the middle of them was Deku, and standing on each side of him were the headless Nomu and the chainsaw Nomu. All for One, it seems that Specimen has rescued the other Nomu from those pesky heroes, and it seems that he's captured a few children as well. As Bakugo looked towards Deku, he noticed that the 4 people he captured were Kirishima, Todoroki, Momo, and Iida, who were all in disguise. Seeing them, he doesn't say a word, but is angry with the 4 for coming here. Bakugo's mind. Those damn idiots, why the hell are they here? Don't they know it's dangerous? As Bakugo remained silent, he heard Shigaraki call out to Deku's new name. Shigaraki, Specimen, come. And without a second thought, Deku walked over towards Shigaraki. Doing this, he walked past Bakugo, who glanced over at his covered face. Once Deku was now face to face with Shigaraki, he bowed his head to him. Shigaraki, you did a good job once again. Deku, thank you. Hearing Deku get praised by this villain, Bakugo grew enraged for what they have done to his childhood friend. Bakugo, you damn bastards. Yelling that out, everyone began to look over at Bakugo, even his classmates who were still clinging to consciousness. Shigaraki, what did you say, you damn brat? Bakugo, you heard me loud and clear, you damn bastard. After saying that, Bakugo turns to face Shigaraki and Deku, whose anger was on the face towards them. Bakugo, how dare you make my old friend into one of your monsters? This isn't something he deserves. Shigaraki, is that right? Well, sorry to burst your bubble, that friend you knew back then is now dead and gone, and in his place is the monster that will kill and consume anyone that dares harm him. Hearing this, Bakugo doesn't want to believe it, so he looks at Deku once more and stares into his eyes to see if that boy he once played with is still there. Bakugo, Izuku, I know you're not dead, because you're standing there right before my eyes, so come on, snap out of it. You're not a monster, you're my friend who I used to play with back when we were little. We used to have so much fun together, but that all changed when I got my quirk, and since then I was a total jerk to you and I made your life into a living hell, so please come back so I can apologize to the boy I called my friend. Saying that last part, Bakugo began to shed tears that ran down his cheeks. Deku, Ka-chan, too. Hearing Deku say his nickname, Bakugo felt certain that he was breaking through to him, but before you can even say another word to him, All Might soon arrived and stood in between the League of Villains and One for All. All Might, don't worry young Bakugo, I am here now. As All Might yelled that out, Deku faced away from Bakugo and looked over at All Might and remembered his orders that Shigaraki gave him. Deku, kill, and without any hesitation Deku began running straight towards All Might. But once he got close, All Might sensed him coming, so I turned around and punched him in his chest. Doing this, Deku was launched it back, but was then caught by the headless Nomu. All the other Nomu looked at Deku for a minute until they eventually turned their focus over towards All Might. Were they then let out growling and snarling towards him? So without any orders, all the other Nomus begin charging All Might. As some of them got close they began getting punched back, but as more and more charged him he began to get overwhelmed with all the Nomu. As this was happening Deku regained his consciousness from that punch. And what he saw before his eyes were all the other Nomu he saved were now fighting for him. Wanting to join into the fight, the headless Nomu puts him back on his feet and they both begin charging All Might. Seeing all the Nomu fight against All Might, the League of Villains were speechless and were also distracted as well. So taking this opportunity Bakugo ran over towards his classmates to check up on them. Soon as he got to them he kneeled down and saw that they were still conscious. 1. Kirishima. Hey Baku bro, we came to rescue you. Bakugo. Beat them idiots. Bakugo wanted to say more than that to them but knew he didn't have enough time, so he helped them up and began sneaking away with them. But as Bakugo was sneaking away he couldn't help but to look back to see Deku who was fighting All Might with the other Nomu. Seeing this he felt bad that he couldn't help his friend. Bakugo's mind. Izuku, I promise when we meet again I'll make you remember everything, so you can come back and we can be friends again. 3. Right after Bakugo said that in his head, him and the other successfully sneaked off. From them doing so twice notices that they're no longer here and alerts the others about this. As soon as they take notice of this, Shigaraki knew that his plan has failed. What made matters even worse, more pro-heroes begin showing up to save All Might and corner the League of Villains. Seeing this, All for One lent his assistance once more by activating Kurogiri's quirk to send all of the League members somewhere else, but as Shigaraki was being sucked into the portal he reached out his right hand towards All for One, and called out for him as he was fully pulled into the portal. After that the portal then shut, and All for One gaze turned back to Deku who was still fighting alongside with the other Nomu. All for One, specimen returned to Shigaraki at once. Hearing those orders from All for One himself, Deku couldn't disobey them at all, so he got on all fours and began running away, but as he did this the headless Nomu and Chainsaw Nomu phone began following behind him. Along with a few, while they're running the flying Nomu burst out of the rubble and begin flying above Deku until eventually swooping down and picking them up. As Deku and the other Nomu began to escape only a few stayed behind to fight off the heroes the best they can. Aftermath of fight. After the giant battle between All Might and All for One, Deku and the other Nomu were completely long gone from that area and were now in the mountains heading towards Shigaraki's location, but on their way there, Deku began thinking all about what Bakugo said to him. Deku, Kachan, friend. A few weeks after All Might's last fight with All for One, the heroes immediately began looking for the League of Villains and the handful of Nomu that escaped. But as all the pro-heroes were out there searching, the teachers of UA began visiting their students' homes to talk to their parents about dorms on campus so they could keep a better eye on them. Many of the parents were a bit hesitant, so they had to be convinced by the teachers. But in the Bakugo household, they merely agreed for their son to stay there so you wouldn't get captured again by the League of Villains. So after that decision was made, Bakugo stayed in his room and began packing some boxes for his move to the dorms. But while he was packing he suddenly found an old picture that fell onto the ground. He reaches down and picks it up. From doing so he then looks at it, which makes his heart completely heavy. Suddenly he heard a knock on his door, so immediately put the picture in his back pocket and faced towards the door as it opened to reveal his mom. 1. Mitsuki. Hey there Katsuki, are you almost finished packing what you need for your move? Bakugo. Yes, now what do you want? Mitsuki. Well, a friend of yours came by. Bakugo. Who? Mitsuki begins to open the door all the way to reveal Kirishima, who waved and smiled at Bakugo. Kirishima. Hey there Bakugo. Bakugo tisks at Kirishima and looks away from him so he can continue packing. Mitsuki. Little brat. Sorry about him, you just head inside and I'll be back with some lemonade for the two of you. Kirishima. Thanks Mrs. Bakugo. Mitsuki. Oh, don't mention it. Kirishima steps inside of Bakugo's room, which makes Mitsuki shut the door, leaving the two alone, but as they were both in there Bakugo acknowledged Kirishima even once. Kirishima. Your mom is really nice. Bakugo doesn't say a thing and just continues packing silently. Kirishima. You got pretty cool room. Those rock posters up there pretty sick. I don't think I've ever heard of them. Do you mind recommending some songs of this? Hearing that, Bakugo then dropped a box of stuff onto the ground, which made Kirishima stop talking. Bakugo. Cut the crap shitty hair, why are you here? Kirishima. I just wanted to check up on you buddy, I've been texting you the past few days but you didn't reply back so I decided to come here. Bakugo. Is that really all? Kirishima. Yeah it is. After that was said, Bakugo let out a sigh as he then went over to his bed and sat down. Kirishima goes over to him and sits right next to him on his bed. Kirishima. Hey Bakugo, can I ask you something? Bakugo. What is it? Kirishima. It's about that Nomu you were talking to that night, was he really a friend of yours? Bakugo. Yeah he was. Kirishima. Do you mind telling me about him? Bakugo. Sigh, Finn. His name is Izuku Midoriya, we grew up together, we were good friends until. Kirishima. Until what? Bakugo. Until I got my quirk. When I got it I felt more powerful than anyone else, especially Izuku since he turned out to be quirkless. Kirishima. Quirkless. Bakugo. Yeah that's right, but instead of being a good friend and giving him some comfort, I constantly bullied him about being quirkless, and I even gave him the nickname Deku since I thought he was so useless without a quirk. Kirishima. I see, so you just bullied him for being different. 1. Bakugo. Yeah I did, and I knew I must have made his life into a living hell, since I reminded him he could never reach his dream. Kirishima. What was his? Bakugo. He wanted to be a hero just all might, but being the asshole that I am, I kept reminding him he could never be like that, and instead told him that he should take his own life so he can be reborn with a quirk. Kirishima. That's awful, why would you even tell him that? Bakugo. I don't know. I was too full of myself until he suddenly disappeared one day. At first I thought he just ran away because he was a coward. But when I heard they found his notebook that was covered in his own blood, I began to worry about him, so when the cops stopped their search for him, I started my own. I searched for clues in his desk, places that I'll see him go to, but there was nothing that could find. I didn't know where my friend was or whether he was alive or not, but I didn't give up searching, because I wanted to find him no matter what, and I guess in the end I did find him but not as that kid I once knew before. From saying that, Bakugo began to clench his fist very tightly. Bakugo. Why? Why the hell did I have to be such a damn asshole to him? As Kirishima looked at Bakugo, he suddenly noticed that Bakugo was on the brink of tears, which was shocking to see. Bakugo. If only I was a better friend, then he would have never ended up like that. Tears then begin to run down Bakugo's cheeks, so being a good friend Kirishima puts his right hand on Bakugo's back and give him comfort. Kirishima. It's all right Bakugo. Bakugo. No it's not, it's my fault that he's like that now, and it's my responsibility to try to bring him back to the way he was no matter what. Kirishima. Then if that's the case, I'll help you bring him back. Hearing that, Bakugo looks over at Kirishima who has the look of determination on his face. Kirishima. I know I don't know the guy like you do, but I'm sure with my help you could bring him back, so what do you say? Bakugo lets out a small laugh as he smiles, and looks over at Kirishima. Bakugo. You really are an idiot, and if that's the case you can help me. Kirishima. Great to hear buddy, and I promise I won't tell anyone that I saw you crying. Bakugo. Good, because if you did then I'll blast you to next week. Kirishima. Haha. Now that's the Bakugo I know. As Bakugo wiped away his tears from his face, his mom soon entered the room with the tray of lemonade. After they take the cups of lemonade, Bakugo yells at her to get out, which she then responds with her own yell for him not to raise his voice at her. After she left, Bakugo and Kirishima faced one another and clinked their glasses of lemonade for their partnership, and they both took a sip of their lemonade. Bakugo reached behind his back pocket and pulled off the picture he found earlier and showed it to Kirishima. The picture was with him as a kid and standing next to him was Deku who was smiling. Bakugo's mind. Don't worry Izuku, I will bring you back to the way you were, just wait a little longer. As the search for the League of Villains and the Nomus continued, Endeavor who didn't participate in the search was instead looking into something very important that involves the Nomu, so as he made his way through his own agency, he soon entered the room filled with lab equipment and scientists, but entering inside he sees one of his many sidekicks looking around so he begins to approach her. Endeavor. Burnin, what are you doing in here? Burnin. Oh hey there boss, I'm just checking out your little science project that you had these guys work on. Endeavor. First things first, it's not a project, and second, you shouldn't be in here, you should be taking care of those reports that I signed you to. Vernon. Don't worry, I finished that a while ago, and to be honest I was actually curious myself what you were working on in here, so come on, now that I'm in here you have to tell me. Endeavor. Sigh, your persistence annoys me, but since you are trustworthy I'll tell you, so come along. Vernon. Right behind ya. Endeavor then began leading Vernon over to a glass case that is containing an all-black severed arm. Vernon. Is that an arm? Endeavor. Yes it is, but it isn't any ordinary arm, this arm belongs to a Nomu. Vernon. A Nomu, but isn't this arm a bit too small compared to those other Nomus? Endeavor. Yes it is, but it is still a Nomu arm, I retrieved it on the night of the hero killer's death. Vernon. Whoa, do you think that who or whatever this arm belonged to killed the hero killer? Endeavor. Perhaps, but I don't care if it killed him. What I do care about is that if it was able to kill him then it is more of a threat than he was, that's why I've had these scientists experimenting on this arm. 1. Vernon. So what you've learned from it so far? Endeavor. Well, for starters, even though that it's severed, it still has functioning blood cells. Vernon. But that's impossible. Endeavor. That's what I thought as well. But it turns out it is true, which meant there was more to learn about it. So I had the scientists continue the research on it, which took quite longer than I expected, but in the end they received as much research as I expected, so I wanted the arm destroyed completely. When the scientists obliged to do so they soon discovered that the arm can't be destroyed by simple matters. They tried burning, melting, and even blowing it up, but the arm still remained intact, so I had the scientists start something new. Vernon. What was it? Endeavor. To destroy the arm completely. And as soon as they find out what could destroy the arm then perhaps we can use it against those damn Nomu. Vernon. So you're trying to find their weakness? Endeavor. That's right, and once we do find that out then those Nomus are no longer going to be a problem. As Endeavor and Vernon stood there looking at the severed Nomu at arm, they began to wonder what exactly could be these monsters' weakness. League of Villains hideout, while Endeavor was in his agency trying to figure out a weakness for the Nomu. The League of Villains were just recovering from a meeting with a Yakuza boss that twice. But really didn't go so well. Big Sis Magna was killed and Mr. Compress lost his left arm. And the one responsible for doing this was the Yakuza boss who called himself Overhaul. The other League members want to kill him here now but were stopped when Overhaul's own group bursted through the walls. Shigaraki managed to kill only one of them, but that was it. Before things could get even more violent, Overhaul stopped his own group, gave Shigaraki an offer to think about. After that was done he then proceeded to leave along with his group. As 2 cars drove away, after they left Toga so angry that she wanted to go cut them all, but Shigaraki protested on her doing so, knowing they'll be getting what they deserve sooner than later. Up the dirt road, as Overhaul was sitting in the backseat of his car, he took off his jacket and attempted to clean it with wet wipes. Overhaul. Damn it, it's not coming off. Chronostasis. Well, of course it's not. Blood can be simply wiped off that easily. Mimic. He's right about that, but don't worry boss, I'll have your jacket clean when we get back to the base. Overhaul. You better. Namoto Shin. So boss, do you think Tamura Shigaraki will take your offer and work for us? Overhaul. He has no choice. If you want to complete whatever goal he has then he's going to need my help, and I don't think his little League of Villains could do a damn thing. Mimic. Haha. You got that right. Suddenly the car then stops, which irritates Overhaul in the sudden stop. Overhaul. Hey, why did we stop? Setsuna Taya. Sorry sir, there's someone standing in the middle of the road. Overhaul. What? As Overhaul and the others in the back leaned up in the seat to look through the car windshield, he saw a person standing a few feet away from the car but as he looked at him he couldn't see his face even though the front lights of the car was shining on him. Mimic. I bet it's one of Shigaraki's little League members. Chronostasis. It probably is, but we should still be cautious, so, Hojo, go check him out. Hojo, you. Right. Hojo gets out of the passenger seat in the front and begins to make his way over to the person. As soon as he got face to face with the person, he noticed that they had a hood on which was covering their face. Hojo. Hey, are you part of the League of Villains as well? With no response back, Hojo went ahead and grabbed his hood to try to grab his attention, but as soon as he did that a swipe of the person's hand crossed Hojo's face. Everyone in the car saw that and were wondering what happened, but as Hojo began slowly turning around everyone leaned up from their seats to soon see Hojo's jaw hanging from the right side of his flesh. Overhaul. What the hell? As Hojo's body fell to the ground. Everyone in the car was ready to come out and kill the person responsible of this. But before they could, they then heard a crash behind them. So they look out the back window and saw the headless Nomu ramming itself against the truck that had Katsukame Rikia and Tengai Hakiji inside. Fun that one ram the truck begins to flip until it reaches the edge of the road that ends up rolling down the hill and hitting a tree, which then blows up, killing those two instantly. Seeing that, Overhauled couldn't believe it. Suddenly a chainsaw ripped through the car roof and began shredding it all the way down. After that, the chainsaw was then pulled out, and the car roof was now being pried open, revealing the chainsaw Nomu. Chronostasis quickly raised his gun and began shooting the Nomu. But the bullets only bounced off his skin, due to him shooting at the Nomu. He was then instantly killed when a chainsaw began to drill through his body. As that happened, the others in the car immediately got out. But as soon as Setsuna Teya stepped foot out the car, he was soon swept up into the air by the flying Nomu. As soon as he was high up into the air, the Nomu let go of him, letting him fall to his death. After that happened, Namoto Shin suddenly had his neck wrapped with the tongue, which then pulled him into the forest. Overhaul and Mimic see this and look towards the direction he was pulled towards. But before they could try to attempt to save him, they soon heard the sounds of a screams following with sounds of flesh tearing and bones breaking. Hearing those sounds, Mimic got so scared that he fell to the ground, making a syringe fall out of his pocket. He quickly notices it and begins crawling over towards it. But as he reached over to grab the syringe, a foot then stomped on it, making the glass syringe and the serum inside go all over the ground. Seeing that, Mimic then began to look up to see the hooded person that killed Hojo, so as he was about to crawl away, he was then grabbed and lifted into the air, being choked, and soon enough his neck was soon snapped, killing him instantly. I was then dropped to the ground. Seeing that all the other of his members are now dead, Overhaul quickly took off his gloves and was preparing himself to fight against the Nomu, but before you could, he soon heard a voice. Deku, all of you, die. 1. As Overhaul looked towards Deku, who removed his hood revealing his face. He quickly ran towards him to try to kill him with a single touch. But as soon as he extended his right hand out to him, Deku immediately grabbed him by the wrist and bent his arm, doing the opposite direction, making the bone in his arm pops out through his flesh. As Overhaul yelled with pain, he soon attempted to touch Deku's face with his hand. But as soon as it's hang out close, Deku opened his jaws and bit down on 3 of his fingers, which he then ripped out of his hand. After doing so, Deku then lets go of Overhaul's wrist, letting him fall to his knees. As he was on his knees, he saw his fingers being spit to the ground in front of him, and as he looked up at Deku, he saw him surrounded with all the other Nomu who helped him attack his group. At that moment, for the very first time, Overhaul was now consumed with fear. Overhaul, please, don't. Deku raises his left hand up and protrudes his sharp cloth. He then takes a look into Overhaul's eyes and says a single word to him. Deku, die. With that said, Deku then sent his claws straight towards Overhaul's head, but suddenly Deku then heard a whistle, which then stopped his claws that were inches away from severing his head. Deku pulled back his arm and turned around to see Shigaraki approaching him. Shigaraki, well done specimen, but I'll take it from here on out. Hearing that, Deku steps aside as Shigaraki got in front of Overhaul and kneeled down to look at him in his face. Doing this, he still sees the fear in his eyes, so he reaches out and pulls off his plague mask off of his face and disintegrates it in front of him. Shigaraki, now listen here, Mr. Overhaul. I don't take offers from those who killed and harmed my friends, but I do take what I want, and if you cherish your life, you will give me everything you have. Am I clear? Overhaul, why yes, I understand. Shigaraki, good, now take us to your base. A few days have passed since Overhaul's disappearance, which was a bad thing for the rest of the Shihasaikai, but it was a good thing for the heroes, especially for the pro-hero and ex-sidekick of All Might, Sir Night Eye, who has dedicated his work to stop the Shihasaikai and their leader Overhaul. So once his agency and the pro-shoes were given a warrant to enter the Shihasaikai place of operation, they did not waste any time and begin their raid upon them. But once they enter through the front gates of the building, there was no Yakuza to try to stop them from getting any further. Sir, Night-Eye, something is wrong here. From saying that, his hero in training Lemillion looked over at him with a puzzling expression. Lemillion, what do you mean, sir? Sir, Night-Eye then went over to the front door with the heroes and police following behind him. As he was face to face with the door, he placed his hand onto the handle, which he then pressed down and slid open all the way. Doing so, he was immediately hit with a foul stench coming from inside. Lemillion grows concern of this and begins to go over to Sir Night-Eye. Lemillion, sir, Night-Eye. Lemillion, wait. Don't get any closer. But it was too late. Lemillion was already close enough to get a whiff of that foul smell, which made him quite nauseous, so Sir Night-Eye goes over to Lemillion and pulls him a good distance away from the scent. From him doing this, everyone there grew concerned, thinking it must have been poison gas from someone's quirk. Bubble Girl, Sir Night-Eye, are you okay? Sir Night-Eye, yes, I'm perfectly fine, but that scent. Fat gum. Is it poison gas? Sir Night-Eye, no, it's not, it's the scent of rotting meat. Hearing that, everyone was quite confused, since they weren't expecting to hear that type of answer, but they still took it into consideration and gave everyone a gas mask. Once everyone had a gas mask on, they went ahead and stepped inside the building. As they walked through the hallway entrance, they noticed a secret entrance poking out from the wall, so Sir Night-Eye slowly begins opening it, but suddenly the door was then pushed all the way open. They looked down and saw a corpse that has been mangled, so Sir kneels down to observe the corpse. Fat gum, what the hell happened to him? Sir Night-Eye, he was brutally mangled to death, and if I had to guess, this person has been dead for at least a few days. Aizawa, what killed him? Hearing that, Sir Night-Eye turned his head back to Aizawa. I looked at him with a serious glare. Sir Night-Eye, I don't know, but whatever it was, it clearly isn't human. With that said, Sir Night-Eye stood up and looked through the open door and saw stairs heading down. Sir Night-Eye, whatever killed this man, that's just hope that it's not down there anymore. So groups of heroes and police officers begin descending down the stairs. After they finally reached the bottom of the steps, they were soon horrified to see corpses littering the ground and giant blood splatters painting the walls. Tamaki, gag, I think I'm going to be sick. Right after Tamaki said that, Fat Gum then gave him a large pack on the back. Fat Gum, can't have you throwing up what you eat today, plus you don't want to have a gas mask full of vomit, do you? Tamaki, why, you're right, I'll do my best to hold it in. So the entire group began moved out of that room and into a large corridor that also had blood-splattered walls and corpses littering the ground. Aizawa, so all these corpses must explain that foul scent you smelled when you opened the door. Sir Night-Eye, yes it is, but I wonder what could have done this type of thing to these people. So as the groups walked deeper and deeper into the corridors, they were soon confronted with a crossroads, so Sir Night-Eye decided to take his group to the left while Aizawa and Fat Gum take their group to the right. With that decided, each group began hitting deeper and deeper into their own corridors. As Sir Night-Eye took his group deeper into the corridors, they soon saw a metal door at the end of the hallway, so him and his group quickly went up to the door and breached inside, but from breaching into the room they saw an armless man tied to a chair and looked that he's been tortured, so Sir Night-Eye quickly runs over to the man to check if he's still alive. Once he ran over to him, he raised his head and was completely shocked who he saw. Sir Night-Eye, it's you, Kai Chisaki. As Sir Night-Eye looked at the corpse of the man he planned to capture, he suddenly noticed a VHS tape hanging around his neck, so he pulls it off and reads and sees a title that says Punishment. Right corridor. As Aizawa and Fat Guns moved deeper into the corridor, they did not see or hear anything that's living. The only thing they saw were corpses. Kirishima, I never believed that I'll see something like this in person. Fat Gum, well kid, there's a lot of things you don't expect to see in this line of work. Aizawa, he's right about that, you never know what type of stuff you'll see next in this type of job. With that said, they continued forward, but Aizawa lingered back to check inside of rooms that were opened, but just a few rooms down, there was a closed door which had a giant scratch mark across it, and next to the door was a broken keypad. Aizawa, it looks like whatever is in here must be very important to just seal it away like this. So Aizawa grabbed hold of the right side of the door and began forcefully pulling it open. With the few pulls he managed to open the door completely. As you looked inside it was completely dark, so he reached behind him and pulled out a flashlight and shined it into the room. As he entered inside he saw a giant bed that has been flipped to its side, but while Aizawa looked towards the bed he suddenly heard a faint voice towards his right, so he quickly signed his life towards the corner of the roof and saw a little girl with gray hair that was crouched down in the corner. Seeing her, Aizawa assumed her as the little girl named Eri who Overhaul held captive, so Aizawa made his way towards the Eri and kneeled down to her. Aizawa, hey, are you okay? As Aizawa reached out towards the little girl, she suddenly turned her head towards Aizawa and looked at him. From her doing this, Aizawa saw that there was complete fear in her eyes, but what was most noticeable on her face was a painted-on smile with blood that has dried up. 2. Eri, are the monsters gone? Hearing that, Aizawa who confused on what she meant by that. Aizawa, monsters? What monster? Eri, the monsters, they came and killed everyone but me. Aizawa, why? Eri, because the one with the green hair locked me in here. 1. Hearing all this, Aizawa tried puzzling all this together. But nothing made sense. The only thing that did was that he needed to get Eri out of here now. So not wanting her to see all the dead bodies and smell that foul scent, Aizawa teared a strip of cloth from the sheet of the bed and used it to cover her eyes. After that he then took off his gas mask and put it over her face. Once all that was done he grabbed the girl and picked her up in his arms. From doing this she held on tightly to him as he stood up and began to leave the room, but once he stepped outside Fat Gum ran over to him and noticed the girl he helped in his arms. Fat Gum, Eraserhead, is that the little girl? Aizawa, I need to get her out of here at once. Fat Gum, all right, but before you do I think you need to see what we found. Aizawa, what is it? Fat Gum, it's video footage of what happened here. Hearing that, Aizawa wanted to go with Fat Gum to see the footage, but as he felt Eri holding on to him tightly, he knew that she must come first. Aizawa, I'm sorry, but this little girl is my main priority right now. Fat Gum, well all right then, we'll retrieve the tapes and catch up with you later on. Aizawa, all right, don't take too long. Fat Gum, roger that. So Aizawa began taking Eri back to where he came from. At the same time everyone part of Aizawa and Fat Gums were watching the footage of what happened here. Tamaki, my god, what are those things? Kirishima, they're Nomu. The footage that everyone was watching had a group of Nanu that was slaughtering person they came across, and leading the group of Nomu was Deku, which Kirishima immediately noticed but didn't tell anyone else about him. Instead he remains quiet and thought of Bakugo and their partnership to find Deku. Kirishima's mind, Bakugo, it looks like your friend has done something horrible here. After what they discovered in those underground corridors, each group began heading back to the surface. Once everyone returned to the surface, Sir Night Eye ordered the other heroes and police officers not to head inside the building without his authorization. With that said he then had the entire building completely sealed off until further notice. After that he then began to approach Aizawa, who was sitting right next to Eri in the back of an ambulance truck. Sir Night Eye, Eraserhead. Hearing his hero name being called out, Aizawa looked ahead and saw Sir Night Eye approaching him, but while he got closer and closer with each step, Aizawa suddenly felt Eri grip onto his left sleeve, which then made him look over at her to see a worried face as she looked at Sir Night Eye approaching. So to calm her down Aizawa raised his left hand and placed it on top of your head, which made her look up at him. Aizawa, it's all right, he's a friend so there's nothing to worry about. Eri, oh okay. After Eri said that she then let go of Aizawa's sleeve and the back at Sir Night Eye, who was now starting right in front of the two. Aizawa, hey there Night Eye, is there something I can help you with? Sir Night Eye, yes you certainly can. He says that as he adjusts his glasses to look over at Eri, who is looking up at him, saying that he kneels down so she doesn't have to look up at him. Sir Night Eye, hello there little girl, I am Sir Night Eye and I am a hero who has come here to stop Kaichisaki. Hearing that name she begins to tremble out of fear, but she's quickly calmed down once she felt Aizawa place his hand onto her right shoulder. Aizawa, it's all right, he won't hurt you anymore. Sir Night Eye, he's right, Kaichisaki has been taken care of, so you won't have to worry about him anymore. Eri, oh okay then, Seeing how calm she is now, Sir Night-Eye decided to ask her some questions. Sir Night-Eye, is it okay if I ask you a question or two? Eri responds to his question by nodding her head yes, seeing that Sir Night-Eye went ahead and began asking his questions. Sir Night-Eye, do you know what happened down there? Ire, yes, the monsters came and began hurting everyone. Sir Night-Eye, monsters. Ire, 1. Yeah, they were big and scary, well all of them but one. Sir Night-Eye, and which one was it? Ire, the one with the green hair. Saying that Eri begins to have a flashback on that day she met a kind monster. Flashback. As Eri was in her room curled on her bed, she then began to hear screaming from the other side of the metal door that had her sealed inside. As the screams outside got louder and louder, Eri's fear grew but so did her curiosity. So she crawled off her bed and slowly approached the metal door where the sounds of scream have suddenly stopped. So she gets on her tippy toes to reach up to the keypad that is on the side of the door and begins pressing the numbers that she's seen Overhaul press countless times he was there. After pressing those buttons the door automatically slid open which Eri then steps outside. First she looks to her left and doesn't see anyone or anything but once she looked towards her right she saw groups of monsters tearing apart the people she was held captive by. Seeing that horrifying sight Eri couldn't make a single sound. Instead all she could do was just watch as she sees those monsters gruesomely tear those people apart. But while she stood there watching in horror, one of the monsters saw her and let out a ear-piercing scream which alerted all the other monsters. After that scream Eri soon saw all of those monsters running towards her. So she quickly went back inside of her room and pressed the close button on the keypad. Doing so the door automatically sealed shut. But even after doing that she began to hear the monsters pounding against the door. Afraid that they might come in, she ran over to the bed and crawled underneath to hide. But while under the bed she looked towards the direction of the door and held her breath. But suddenly the banging then stopped and a whole minute passed which felt like complete hour to Eri. In that silence she was deciding to come out from underneath the bed. But right when she was going to come to a decision the door suddenly opens automatically. Looking towards the opened door, Eri sees the feet and hands of the monsters outside the door from underneath the bed. But out of all of them one steps inside and begin walking around inside. As she looked at the monster's feet walking around the room, she kept her hands over her mouth and nose so she can stay silent. As the monster paced around the room it shortly began walking towards the door. But it then stops right when it was about to step outside. It then turned around and walked over to the edge of the bed which Eri looking under from. As she looked at the blackish-gray feet, she began hoping someone will come and save her from this. But suddenly the bed wasn't thrown to the side of the room, revealing Eri to the monster in front of her. As she slowly began to raise her head up, she finally saw the monster with green hair looking down at her. Seeing it she was so terrified that she couldn't even let out a single scream. As she laid there on the ground the monster then squatted down to and just looked at her, and unexpectedly she heard the monster speak to her. Deku, what is name? Hearing him ask something like that she gulped as she then raised her body up and was on her knees in front of him. Eri, Eri, Deku, Eri. After saying that, Deku she looked over towards the right and saw a little teddy bear on the ground. So he grabbed it and began handing it over to Eri who slowly took it from his hands and held it tightly. But while she held it, Deku began to extend his bloody right hand towards her. Which made her think of the worst, but instead of feeling him grab her, she then felt his finger press against her right cheek which he then began to paint a smile on her face. After Deku did that he stood back up and began stepping outside with all the other monsters. Once he was outside he slammed his fist against the other keypad on the outside which then shut the door. Once the door shut she then heard the sound of metal tear. After that she then heard footsteps walking away from her door until she couldn't hear them anymore. Once it was now dead silence Eri dropped the teddy bear on the ground and curled up on the floor. Curled up on the floor she couldn't believe that the room she saw only as a cell was now more like a safe room to her now. 1. Present. Eri. I always thought all monsters were like Chisaki, but not that one. Sir Night-Eye. The one with the green hair. Eri. He was scary but different. Sir Night-Eye. I see. After saying that Sir Night Eye stood back up and leaned over towards Aizawa to whisper into his ear. Sir, Night Eye, Eraserhead, make sure you keep a very close eye on her. Aizawa, I will. Hearing that, sir, Night Eye backed away from Aizawa and began heading over to Fat Gun, who retrieved video footage of the so-called monsters. After the conversation that Sir Night Eye with Aizawa and Eri, he then went over to Fat Gun, who was standing in front of the open door of a van. As soon as he got close, he tapped onto his shoulder, which made him turn around to face Sir Night Eye. Fat Gum. Oh, hey there Night Eye, can I help you with something? Sir Night Eye, you certainly can. I heard that you retrieved some footage of what happened down there. Fat Gum. Yeah, I did, but the stuff that's on that footage is very horrifying, if I have to say. Sir Night Eye. Well, I'll be the judge of that. With that said, Fat Gum stepped aside from the open door of the van. Doing so, Sir Night Eye was able to look into the van to see a bunch of monitor screens playing the footage of the monsters that Eri said she saw. Sir Night Eye, do you have any idea what those things are exactly? Fat Gum. Well, my new hero in training, Kirishima, told me that those things are actually Nomu. Sir Night Eye. Nomu, huh? The only group that on those things are the League of Villains, which means. Fat Gum. They were here, but why? Sir Night Eye. I don't truly know, but I think I have something that can tell us. Sir Night Eye then reaches his right hand into his jacket and pulls out the VHS tape that is labeled Punishment. He gets into the van and begins to put the tape into a VHS player, where you then press play. Doing so, all the monitor screens begin to show static until finally it shows Overhaul tied down to a chair, any large spotlight shining above him. As Sir Night Eye and Fat Gum looked at him, they can clearly tell that he's been tortured, but while they were looking at him, they then heard the voice of Tamura Shigaraki. Start of tape. Shigaraki. Now, how about you tell us your name? Overhaul. It's K-Kai-C-H Kai. Shigaraki. Oh, come on, speak up. Overhaul. It's Kai Chisaki. Shigaraki. Good. Now how about you tell the camera why a person like you is in this situation? The camera zooms in close to Overhaul's face and shows that he is completely terrified. Overhaul. Because I killed and harmed members of the League of Villains. If you're doing that, this is. Shigaraki. This is your what? Overhaul. My punishment. Shigaraki. That's right. Your punishment is losing everything you built to someone you chose to make an enemy out of, and I think it's time to put you out of your worthless little life. From saying all that, Overhaul looked at the camera and showed terror. Overhaul. Wait. You said if I gave you everything you wanted, then you'll let me go. 1. Shigaraki. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that I was lying, which means Outlet Specimen here will be the one to put you out of your misery. After saying that, the camera then zooms out and shows Deku walking into the camera's view and straight towards Overhaul. Overhaul. No, please. Don't kill me, I don't want to die. As Deku stood right in front of Overhaul, he then grabbed his broken arms and teared them both off of his torso, making him scream out of pure pain. But his screams were put to silence as Deku's monstrous roar echoed throughout the entire room. After his roar, more wouldn't hurt throughout the room, but as soon as the roaring completely stopped, the entire room fell silent. So Deku turned and faced the camera, which she then began walking towards until eventually the footage then stopped. End of tape. Seeing all that, Sir Night Eye and Fat Gum didn't know what to say, but they both knew that the League of Villains and those Nomu were the real threats, and needed to be dealt with immediately before they couldn't continue their onslaught. Alleyway. Meanwhile, close by, Kirishima was in alleyway calling Bakugo. Kirishima. Come on Bakugo, pick up. After a few short rings, Bakugo finally answered the phone. Bakugo. What's up? Kirishima. Good, you answered. I have some news about your friend. Bakugo. What type of news? Kirishima. Well, the news is that he was at the place where my mission was. He slaughtered all the villains there with all those other Nomu. Bakugo. Shit. Did you find any leads where he could be heading next? Kirishima. Sorry, I didn't. Bakugo. Damn it. How the hell are we supposed to find him if we don't know where the hell he is? Kirishima. I don't know, dude, but even if we do find him, are you certain we can help him? Bakugo. What the hell are you talking about? Kirishima. It's just that I saw footage of what he did to people, the way he ripped and teared through them like it was nothing. I'm afraid we can't save your friend from this. Hearing that over the phone, angers Bakugo so much that he has the thought of blasting a giant explosion right into Kirishima's face. Bakugo, listen here, shitty hair. Izuku is still in there and I'm going to get him out of there even if it kills me, so if you think he's nothing but a lost cause then I don't need your help saving him, you got that? Hearing the angry tone in his voice, Kirishima can tell that he meant every word he said. Kirishima, sigh, Bakugo, I chose to help you and I'm still going to help you no matter what, but I'm going to tell you this now, if you can't help him then what are you going to do? Hearing that, Bakugo didn't know how to enter his question, since he didn't know himself what happened if he couldn't save him. Bakugo, I don't know. Kirishima, well you better figure that out quickly before you face him again. With that said, Kirishima hanged up the phone and let out a long sigh as he then looked up at the sky. After months have passed, the League of Villains and the Nomus begin traveling together through the mountains after spending this entire time hiding from the heroes after the raid upon the Shihasaikai, but while they were traveling no one but Shigaraki knew the reason why they were out there. Dabi, hey leader, do you mind telling us now where we're going? Twice. Yeah, we've been walking for hours now and you haven't told us why we're out here, so spill the beans. Toga, yeah Tamura, tell us. Shigaraki, sigh, fine, if it'll shut you all up. From saying that he stopped walking and turned around to the others who also stopped walking, but while he looked at the members of the League of Villains, he also looked at the group of Nomu that were right behind everyone else, and thought they were quite an eyesore, so he called Deku over. Shigaraki, specimen come here now. Being called over, Deku began making his way over to Shigaraki. Once he was in front of him, he then looked up at him. Shigaraki, listen here specimen, I want you and the other Nomus to scout out the area ahead, do you think you can do that? Deku, yes. Shigaraki, good, now go. With that said, Deku's shell quirk shielded his face and began running ahead which all the Oth Nomu began following him. As soon as Deku and the Nomus were gone, Shigaraki began to explain the reason why they are there. Shigaraki, all right, that's out of the way, here's the reason why we're all here. In these mountains, there's another person who is a devoted follower to All for One, and he's nothing like us. Dabi, what do you mean not like us? Shigaraki, let's just say, he is able to destroy a city by himself. Mr. Compress, then I guess he must be quite an interesting person. Shigaraki, I guess you can say something like that. Toga, so what's this guy's name? Shigaraki, it's... Before Shigaraki could say the name, they then heard a giant roar in the direction where Deku and the Nomu went. Spinner, what was that? Shigaraki, Gigantomachia. With that said, the League of Villains began running in that direction where they heard that giant roar. As they began to get closer, as they were getting closer the sounds of different roars started getting louder. Soon enough the League of Villains ran out from the forest and saw all of the Nomu fighting against Gigantomachia who completely towered over all of them. Mr. Compress, is that him? Shigaraki, yeah it is, and it looks like the Nomu have started without us. Dabi, started without us? What the hell are you talking about? Shigaraki, I was going to tell you, that if you are able to bring him down, then he will be on our side. Twice, hold on 1 second, you want us to fight that giant? Shigaraki, if all of you aren't willing to help me, then you can just stay here. From saying that, Shigaraki immediately began running straight into the fight with the Nomu and Gigantomachia. Dabi, damn it, come on. As Dabi said that, him and the others began running into the fight as well. Once the League joined the fight, they immediately began throwing everything they had at Gigantomachia. Dabi shot his flames right at him but it had no effect against him at all. Not even Toga or Spinner's knives could even pierce through his skin. Toga, how the heck are we supposed to bring this guy down? Dabi, I don't know. Just keep doing everything you got at him. Everyone else is doing that. Hearing that, Toga began looking at the others and the Nomu, and saw how hard they are fighting, but while she was looking at them she did not see Deku anyway. Toga, hey Dabi, what? Toga, where is Beastie? As Toga said that, Deku soon jumped out of Gigantomachia's hair. Doing so he then turned around and sunk his claws from his left hand into his head and began sliding down his forehead until eventually stopping right in front of his left eye. As Deku dangled right in front of his eye, he pulled back his right arm and straightened his cloth and straightened his claws, where he then launched right into Gigantomashia's eye. Doing this he lets out a roar of pain which is so loud that the League of Villains have to close their ears. But after his roar he grabbed Deku with his giant left hand and threw him into a large pile of rocks. Afterwards he placed his hand over his eye and began running off. As he began to run off, the Nomu quickly made their way over to Deku and gathered around him. The League of Villains began heading over towards Deku to see if he is all right. Toga, Beastie. Toga was the first of the League to make it to him. As she made her way through the Nomu, she soon saw Deku laying in a small crater which she jumps into. As soon as she got close to him, she fell to her knees and placed her right ear against the center of his chest. Doing so she doesn't hear a heartbeat which begins to scare her, until eventually she heard a faint heartbeat. Hearing that, she took her ear off of his chest and grabbed his head. Toga, Beastie, come on, wake up, please. Suddenly Deku's eyes begin to open slowly, until eventually he saw Toga's face. Deku, Toga. Hearing Deku say her name, Toga immediately hugged him tightly. Doing so the other League members gathered around him. 3. Dabi. Well, it looks like he's all right. Mr. Compress. Thank goodness. As everyone else was happy to know that Deku was all right, Shigaraki wasn't feeling the same, so he goes over to Deku and pushes Toga off of him. After doing so he then grabbed the collar of his hoodie and got right into his face. Shigaraki, you damn brainless beast, you just made Gigantomachia get even farther away from us. Twice. Hey, take it easy. Shigaraki, shut up twice. Now that Gigantomachia ran off, it'll take days for us to track him down, all thanks to this damn idiot monster. Deku, sorry. Hearing that, Shigaraki then let go of Deku collar and began walking away from him. After doing, Toga went back Deku to see if he was okay. Toga, Beastie, are you okay? As Deku looked over at Toga, she then saw a sad expression on his face, which was the first time she's ever seen that on him, so she grabbed the back of his head and pulled him into her chest, giving him a warm embrace. But during the middle of this, black goo suddenly came out of everyone's mouth, which then began to cover their entire bodies, until eventually it teleported everyone away. From being transported away, the League of Villains and the Nomu were now in an underground facility where Deku and the other Nomu were made. Greeting them was Dr. Garaki, who was pleased to see them off, especially Deku himself. Shigaraki, Doctor, why would we brought here? Dr. Garaki, well, I was just informed that one of your allies have been captured by the Meta Liberation Army. Twice. The Meta what? Mr. Compress. The Meta Liberation Army, they are a group of people who believed that they should use their quirk without any consequences. Spinner, I think I might have heard of that group. Weren't they inspired by some sort of book? Shigaraki, not just any book, a book written by a villain named Destro, who was the founder of the Meta Liberation Army. Dr. Garaki, that's right, and it seems that his son has gotten his hands on Jiren. Shigaraki, what does he want with him? He's just a black market merch that we usually get our equipment from. Dr. Garaki, well, that's the reason why. Since he's our connection to the black market, the Meta Liberation Army should assume that he is also an ally. Shigaraki, so what do they want in exchange of his life? Dr. Garaki, they want the League of Villains to go to the city of Deka, which is the place of their operation. Shigaraki, so is that all they want? Dr. Garaki, yes, no other further instructions were given. Shigaraki, all right then, transporters is there right now. Dr. Garaki, as you wish. With that said, black goo began to come out of everyone's mouth and cover their entire body until eventually they're then transported away. Nearby hills, the League of Villains and the Nomu soon appeared in the hills that were very close to the city of Deka, which they had a good view of. Dabi, well, there it is. Should we go down there and see who greets us? Shigaraki, yeah, let's get down there, but first. Shigaraki turned around and goes up to Deku and looks at him with an angry expression in his eyes. Shigaraki, specimen, you and the other Nomu stay here. I don't need you messing this up like last time, do you understand? Deku, why yes, I understand. Shigaraki, good, now let's go everyone. Shigaraki turns away from Deku and begins walking away as everyone else but Toga begin descending down the hill. As everyone else was going down the hill, Toga went over to Deku and placed her hands underneath his chin, making him raise his head up to her. Toga, it's okay beastie, we'll be back, and I promise I'll give you some of those candies you like so much. 1. Hearing Toga speak to him so sweetly, Deku couldn't help but to smile. Deku, thank you, Toga, don't mention it beastie. After saying that, Toga then hugged Deku for a short while. Afterwards she then let go of him and began descending down the hill with everyone else. Once Toga and everyone else was now gone, Deku and the other Nomu sat down on the ground and waited for everyone to return. 30 minutes later, as Deku and the Nomus remained sitting on the ground, Deku suddenly heard the whistle, which made him stand right back up and look over to the city, where he then sees some smoke coming from the neighborhood. Seeing this, he hears the whistle again and locates where it's coming from. So disobeying Shigaraki's orders of staying on the hill, Deku's shell quirk covers his face and begins descending down the hill. The other Nomu sees this and begin descending down the hill with him as well. Nearby neighborhood, as members of the Liberation Army were running through the streets of a neighborhood. Toga was inside of a building hiding and recovering from injuries she was given by a woman named Chito's Kazuki, but also known as Curious. As she was hiding in one of the rooms upstairs, she was blowing into a whistle that she retrieved from Shigaraki, who dropped it earlier on when he was suddenly attacked. She blew into the whistle a couple times until she eventually stopped to catch her breath. Toga, panting, come on, I know this whistle can call beastie here, that's why Tamura tried using it earlier on. As Toga was about to blow into the whistle once more, she then heard the voice of Curious outside of the building she was in. Curious, oh Himiko Toga, where have you run off to? Toga peeks out the window and sees her and a group of people following behind her. Toga's mind, damn it, I thought I lost her back in the city. Suddenly Curious then turns her head over to the window that Toga was picking out from. Seeing this, Toga immediately looked away from the window, and was hoping that she didn't see her, but before she knew it, the wall is right next to her suddenly blew up. So without hesitation she started moving towards the door. But as soon as she reached her hand out to the doorknob, she was then tripped. Looking behind her, she sees some sort of thread wrapped around her ankles, so before she can even pull out a knife and try to cut through the thread, she was then pulled out of the building and into the middle of the streets. Afterwards Toga began to lift herself up, but before she can get up any further, she saw a shadow looming over her, so she turns her head to her left and looks up, where she then sees Curious standing over her. Curious, it looks like I found you, Himiko Toga. Toga doesn't say a word to her and instead stays quiet as she looks at her. Curious, nothing to say. Well, if that's the case, I suggest I should end this right here right now. So Curious began to reach out her right hand Toga, but as soon as her hand got close enough, Toga suddenly pulled out a knife from her right sleeve to cut Curious, but before her blade could get near her, Curious' bracelet suddenly covered her hand and shot out an explosion at Toga, which made her fly further back. Hitting the ground, she knew she couldn't win against her, so she began crawling away, but Curious was already behind her with her arm raised up to shoot another explosion at Toga. She turns her head around and sees this and begin to scream out. Toga, no, Curious, die Himiko Toga. And with their smile on Curious' face, she then sent her hand towards Toga, but right before she can shoot out an explosion, her right forearm was suddenly sliced off of her arm, which made her screw out of pain as she then backed up and fell to her knees as she then placed her left hand over the wound. Curious, my arm, Deku, you. Hearing that voice, Curious began to raise her head until she saw Deku standing right before her eyes. Looking at him, she sees blood dripping from his claws on his left hand, and finally realized that he was the one to cut off her forearm. Deku, you hurt Toga. Seeing how monsters he is, Curious began to scooch back and call for her lackeys to help her. Curious, help, one of you save me. As she then looked behind it, she saw her group being slaughtered by the other Nomu. Seeing that, she looks back at Deku, who began to approach her with his sharp claws, but before you can get any closer to her, even heard Toga call out to him. Toga, be beastie. Hearing his nickname, he quickly goes over to her and kneels down. Seeing how injured she is, he puts his left hand behind her head and lifts her up. Deku, Toga, okay. Toga smiles at him and raises her left hand, which she then placed on his right cheek. Toga, I am now Beastie, thank you for coming. Seeing how injured she is, Deku knew that he needed to get her some help, so he picked her up and began searching for one of the other League of Villain members. But right when he left, Curious let out a sigh of relief from not being killed by him. But her relief was short-lived when she noticed a large shadow looming over her. She turned around and saw the headless Nomu standing over her. And before she can even say a word, the headless Nomu grabs onto her head and lets her up. As she struggled to break free from a strong grip, she suddenly raised her left arm, making the bracelet on her wrist cover her hand and shoot out an explosion right at the Nomu. But as soon as the smoke of the explosion blew away, she saw that it had no effect on him. So before she could shoot out another explosion, the headless Nomu slammed her head down to the ground so hard that it smushed under his hand. Around the city, as the other League members were having trouble dealing with the members of the Meta Liberation Army, all of the other Nomus began helping them what is happening by slaughtering the Meta Liberation members. But during so, Deku soon spotted Twice, who he then jumped down to. So he can ask for his help on helping Toga. Doing so, he did manage to help by making another Toga with his quirk. Seeing how well he is helping her, Deku knew that he could leave her in his hands. He went off to go help everyone else. A few minutes later, the tall building in the center suddenly collapsed. Deku makes his way over to the falling building and rescues Jiren as he was then falling from the building. After doing so, he set them down on a rooftop and cut him free from his restraints. Now free, Jiren thanks Deku and told him that Shigaraki was in a fight with Redestro. Knowing this, he then began heading to the direction where Shigaraki was. Once he arrived, he saw that Shigaraki and Redestro were fighting in a large crater. Seeing this, he wanted to help Shigaraki in his fight, but deep down he knew that this was his fight alone, so he stood there watching. Minutes later, the other League members and the rest of the Nomus were witnessing the fight as well. And in the end, Shigaraki was victorious as Redestro bowed down to him. As Deku saw this, he let out a roar. From doing this, other Nomu began to let out their own roars as well, showing that they have won this battle. After the League of Villains' victory against the Meta Liberation Army, Shigaraki and Redestro decided to merge their two groups together as the new Paranormal Liberation Front. And due to this, Shigaraki alone managed to get Gigantomachia on his side by showing his true strength, which made him loyal to him. After doing all of this, all of the League of Villain members and the Nomus returned to Dr. Garaki, who allowed everyone of the Paranormal Liberation Front to stay inside the building he worked. And due to this, the League of Villains finally had a comfortable place to stay at. So as 5 of the League of Villain members were in one room together, they were all enjoying a plate of sushi that they were served, but as the others were enjoying it, Twice was sitting in front of a shrine to Toga, who think is dead. Twice, oh Toga, I'm so sorry that I couldn't save you, sniffling. Toga, Jin, I'm still alive, now cut it out, it's annoying that you think I'm dead. Toga says that as she lounges on a bean bag while holding a pair of chopsticks in her right hand. Mr. Compress, it's been quite a while for all of us to enjoy a meal together. Dabi, not all of us, Mr. Compress. Yes, I know, Shigaraki and Specimen aren't here. Toga, yeah, where are those two? I promised Beastie some of his favorite candies. Spinner, well, if you guys don't know, I should tell you that I saw them a few hours ago entering an elevator with that doctor guy. Dabi, and you just bringing this up now? Spinner, I didn't think it was any of my business. Mr. Compress. And you were right about that, Spinner. Whatever the doctor has planned for those two, it is none of our business, so let us mind our own business and enjoy food we were given. Dabi, yeah, all of you can enjoy it, I have something else to do. Spinner, then can I have the rest of your sushi? Dabi, sure, I don't even like some of that stuff anyways. With that said, Dabi walked out of the room, leaving everyone else to enjoy the sushi. Toga, this stinks, I really wanted to award Beastie for what he did for us back at Deka. Mr. Compress, don't you worry Toga, I'm sure Specimen will return soon enough. Underground laboratory, as Shigaraki was inside of an all-white room, Dr. Garaki soon entered. Dr. Garaki, so Tamura, have you prepared yourself yet? Shigaraki, yes I have. Dr. Garaki, good, now follow me. From saying that, Shigaraki began following behind Dr. Garaki. While doing so, he began to wonder where Deku was. Shigaraki. Doctor, do you mind telling me where you've taken specimen? Dr. Garaki. Ah yes, when I had you go to that room to prepare yourself, I took specimen to the other Nomu. Shigaraki. I see, but why do that? Dr. Garaki. Well, to tell you the truth, I've been secretly observing specimen and I have to say he is the perfect Nomus that has been created. Shigaraki. What do you mean? Dr. Garaki. Well, on that night the master had his fight against All Might. Specimen managed to save all of the captured Nomu from the heroes. From him doing this, the Nomu show their allegiance to him. Shigaraki. I've noticed that as well, since those other Nomu who traveled with us only listened to specimen's orders instead of mine or anyone else's. Dr. Garaki. Yes, I've noticed that. I couldn't even order those Nomu to do something without telling specimen to tell them to do it. Shigaraki. So what does this mean, Doctor? Dr. Garaki. It means if he can make the other Nomus swear allegiance only to him, he will be able to lead them all with more strategy. Shigaraki. But wouldn't that be dangerous? Having one Nomu control them all will be foolish if you don't have control of them all yourself. Dr. Garaki. Yes, I started that already, and you don't need to control them all, the only one you need to control is their leader. Hearing this, Shigaraki realized that since he has control of Deku already, then that means he has control of all the other normal himself. Shigaraki. I see now, as long as we have control of specimen, then we have control of all of this other Nomu. Dr. Garaki. That is correct, and soon enough the Nomu will be a force to be reckoned with. Hearing that, Shigaraki couldn't help but to smile on the thought of him leading an army of Nomu against the heroes. Dark Room. While Shigaraki and Dr. Garaki were on the other side of the laboratory, Deku was inside of a dark room surrounded by hundreds of Nomu who were kneeling down to Deku, who has now become their alpha. 8. Endeavor's Agency. From hearing that the city of Deka has been destroyed by the League of Villains and the Metal Liberation Army during their confrontation, Endeavor, the new #1 hero, gathered all of the strongest heroes and heroes in training together in his agency. So while all those heroes were gathered in the lobby of the agency, Endeavor soon appeared on the very top of some stairs where he didn't look down at all of the heroes that showed up. Endeavor, all of you know why you're here today, and that's for finally taking the fight to the League of Villains. Saying that, all the other heroes nodded their heads and agreed. Endeavor, but before we take the fight to them, I must tell you about the Nomu that all of you must be aware of. These monsters were once people but not anymore. They are too late to save now, so it is our duty to eliminate them all, and to do so I have recently discovered these creatures' weakness. As Endeavor said that, two scientists came out and were wheeling out a glass case that held Deku's old severed arm, which everyone could see. Endeavor, in this case, is an arm that once belonged to one of these monsters. Endeavor then goes over to the case and takes the lid off. After doing so, one of the scientists then hands him a vial containing a bright blue liquid. Endeavor, in my hand is what their weakness is. Saying that, he pours the entire liquid onto the arm, and in a matter of seconds the skin and flesh of the arm begins melting off completely until it was nothing but bone. Endeavor, with this, we'll be able to destroy it all of those monsters. As he said that, more scientists came out wheeling in some crates which they then opened, revealing equipment that will be used to face against the Nomu. Endeavor, those wrist guards you see before you, are the weapons we'll be using against the Nomu. On each side is a vial of their weakness. By clenching your fist you'll be able to shoot out the liquid, so I suggest you get a comfort of using it now then later. Hearing this, all the heroes begin going over to the crates and grabbing their own wrist guard. Amongst the heroes who were grabbing a wrist guard was Bakugo. As he was grabbing his own, he looked at it and thought of Deku. Doing so, he hated the thought of someone using this against Deku. After a week of preparing, all the heroes that Endeavor was leading were now ready to face off with the Paranormal Liberation Front and the Nomu. So while they were gathered on a hilltop, they began to put on the wrist guards. Doing so, all of them made sure that there was enough of the liquid to shoot up at the Nomu. As all the other heroes were doing that, Bakugo was still staring out to the city and holding his wrist guard in his left hand. Bakugo's mind. Izuku, I know you are here, all I have to do is find you and to try to convince on who you are. From saying that in his head, he then felt a hand grab onto his right shoulder, which made him turn his head to the right to see Kirishima. Kirishima, hey, if your friend is here then we'll find and save him together. Hearing that, Bakugo stared back at the city as he then put his wrist guard on his left arm. Bakugo. I hope so. As the heroes were now equipped and ready, Endeavor ordered the heroes in training and some of the other heroes to go into the city and evacuate the citizens, while he and a larger group of heroes go to the building where the Paranormal Liberation Front are hiding out in. Commanding those orders, they immediately took action, so as the young heroes went into the city, Endeavor began marching with his group towards the building, doing so put his fingers up to his ear and pressed down on a earpiece. Endeavor. Hawks, we're heading to the building already, you better prepare yourself. Hawks. You got it, number one. Hawks says that as he pulls out a feather from his wings and prepares to ambush the villain who was coming to the room he is in. While he was doing so, Endeavor and his group were still far out, which upsetted a certain bunny-eared hero, so without any hesitation she ran ahead of everyone, leaving them all in her dust. From seeing her run ahead, Endeavor called out to her. Endeavor. Mirko, wait. From calling out her hero name, she still didn't respond. Instead she ran and ran until she noticed a garage that led underground. Seeing this, she stopped and smirked. Mirko. Well, looks like I found myself a way in. Saying that, you ran towards the garage door and jumped as she then kicked it down. After doing so, she laid down a dark corridor and began running straight through it. While she ran deeper and deeper into the corridor, she had no idea what was waiting for her at the end of it. Dark room. While the heroes were getting closer to the building, some of the Nomu began to sense their presence, so they made their way over to the Alpha. As soon as they approached him, they kneeled down in front of him. Deku. What's wrong? The Nomu begin communicating with Deku by letting out small clicking sounds which he is able to understand. Nomu. Click, 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 click. There are people coming our way. Hearing this, Deku immediately used his shell quirk to cover his face. From doing so, all the other Nomu quickly noticed this and knew that they were going to go into battle. So what a few of his orders, the Nomu broke through the steel doors of the room, which grabbed the attention of Dr. Garaki, so he made his way over to the broken doors and saw Deku and the other Nomu stepping out of the room. Dr. Garaki. Specimen. What is the meaning of this? From hearing Dr. Garaki say that, Deku looked over at him. Deku. Danger is coming. From hearing that, an alarm starts going off from some motion sensor that was in the corridor Mirko was running through. Hearing the alarm, Dr. Garaki ran back to his computer. From him doing so, some of the Nomu that were following Deku's orders jumped straight into the ceiling and began digging upwards. As they were doing this, Deku heard distance roaring, so he raised his left arm and extended his fingers towards that direction, which made a few of the stronger Nomu begin to head towards that direction. Above ground. As Endeavor and a few heroes split away from the group to follow Mirko into that dark corridor. His group that were above ground were finally in front of the building. So they went ahead and began charging straight towards it. But as they were getting closer, they stopped once a large hand bursted out of the ground. Seeing that one hand, they began to see other hands bursting from the ground until finally they all saw a handful of Nomu emerging from the ground. Seeing this, they were not expecting to bump into the Nomu so soon. But now that they were face to face with them, they had no choice but to face them. So as the Nomu begin sprinting towards the group of heroes, they raise their arms and begin to shoot the liquid of their weakness at them. Once the liquid hits some of them, it begins burning through their skin, making them feel so much pain that they end up dying. The other Nomu see this and immediately knew if they were hit with that liquid they will die. So as they were being shot at by the heroes, they begin maneuvering around their line of sight, not allowing them to get a clean shot or making them miss. Doing this, some of the Nomu were able to pin down some heroes and finish them off. Seeing this, some of these shoes decided to run inside the building, while a few others began fighting off the Nomu the best they could. Room in building. As some of the heroes were now inside the building, Hawks was inside of a room, where he had Twice pinned to the ground, to convince him to give up. Hawks, come on Jin, take the offer and this will be all over. Twice. Screw you Hawks, I trusted you, Hawks. Sorry Jin, I didn't want this to end like this. With that said, Hawks raised his belated feather up and was about to strike Twice. But before you could, he then heard the doors being kicked open. Hearing this, he quickly looked over his shoulder and saw Dobby, who immediately raised his hand and shot out a huge amount of flames straight towards Hawks. Seeing the large, Hawks quickly grabbed Twice and slapped his wings towards his right, making him and Twice avoid being burned. Once the flames cleared out, Dobby looked over towards the right and saw Hawks still pinning Twice to the ground. Dobby. So this was your true intentions, huh? Infiltrate and attack from the inside. Pretty smart but not smart enough. As Dobby ignited the palm of his hands with blue flames, then made some of his feathers fly towards Dobby, but while he did this, an arm suddenly came out from Twice's back which then punched him in the face, making Twice break free from him and allowing him to get some distance as well. Twice. Dobby do it. With that said, Dobby shot out a huge amount blue flames straight towards Hawks. Dobby, get out of here Twice, now, Twice, all right, thanks. So Twice then began running straight to the door, but while he was getting closer he then saw Hawks appear in front of the door. Dobby noticed this and began to turn around, but before you can turn completely around Hawks was all ready to strike Twice down. But right when his feather blade was about to strike Twice, he then felt something grab hold of his right ankle. Feeling this he turned his head around and saw the headless Nomu who was the one grabbing hold of his ankle, and with his strength he pulled him back and sent him flying towards the wall on the other side of the building. From hitting the wall he fell to the ground below, but from hitting the ground he was slowly beginning to pick himself up. Doing so he looked up and saw Nomu's fighting against the heroes. Hawks, what the heck is going on here? As some of the Nomu kept fighting the heroes below. The chainsaw Nomu leapt up to the third floor. Doing so he heads straight towards the hero who has captured Toga and Mr. Compressed. The hero notices him coming, but before you could use his quirk, the chainsaw normal extended his revving blades which pierced through the hero's chest, sending him and the chainsaw Nomu through a wall together. From being saved by the chainsaw Nomu, Toga and Mr. Compress looked over the railing and saw the other Nomu. Mr. Compress, where did all these Nomu come from? Toga, it was Beastie, he sent them to save us. Mr. Compress. Then let us not waste this opportunity, let's group up with the others. Toga. Right. So the two begin making their way over to Dobby and Twice. Doing so the chainsaw Nomu comes out of the hole and sees that Toga and Mr. Compress are safe now, so he jumps back down to the floor and continues fighting along with his fellow Nomu. Underground laboratory. As the heroes were fighting the Nomu that were above ground, Mirko was on her own fighting against groups of Nomu in the underground laboratory, but for some reason the Nomu stopped charging her and instead just surrounded her. Mirko. Come on you damn freaks of nature, I'm ready to kill more of you. As she waited for the next Nomu to come at her, she sent me her footsteps approaching her direction, so she looked ahead at group of Nomu who then began to step aside. As they did this, Mirko saw a figure approaching her until finally she was able to clearly see it in the light, which turned out to be Deku. Mirko. So are you going to be the next Nomu I take down? Deku didn't respond back, instead he looked at her with a death glare which sent a shiver down her spine. Mirko's mind. Why the hell did a shiver run down my spine? Don't tell me I'm afraid of this thing. Deku, you kill Nomu. Hearing that, Mirko was shocked for not expecting to hear a Nomu speak. Deku. Now Nomu, kill you. While the pro heroes took the fight to the villains and Nomu, the young heroes in training were still evacuated the civilians in the city, but while doing so they heard constant roaring in the direction of the building where all the stronger pro heroes were. Iida. Everyone. Let's hurry up and evacuate everyone quickly. As Iida said that out loud to the entire classmates, Bakugo suddenly blasted himself into the air free, then began making his way towards the direction of the roaring. Iida. Bakugo. What do you think you're going? As Iida and his other classmates looked towards Bakugo, they begin wondering why he was heading towards the building where all the villains are at. As they all wondered that, only one of them knew why exactly he was heading towards there by himself. Kirishima. Oh no, saying that, Kirishima did not waste any time and began running after Bakugo, which everyone saw him doing. Iida. Kirishima. Come back here, Kirishima. Sorry press, I can't. I have to help my friend. Hearing that everyone was wondering why those two were heading towards there, but while they were wondering that, Bakugo was already far ahead and only had one thing in his mind. Bakugo's mind. I'm coming Izuku. Underground laboratory. As Bakugo and Kirishima were making their way towards the building, Deku and Mirko were facing off against one another. As the number 6th hero looked at the monster in front of her, she grinned and spoke to him with her cocky attitude. Mirko. Kill me, huh? Well, how about you come here and try that damn freak of nature? As she said this, Deku began approaching her slowly until eventually he changed his pace into a quick sprint. Even though he was moving so fast, Mirko had a clear sight of him. As soon as he got close, Mirko raised her left leg and kicked Deku on the right side of his face, which sent him flying towards an empty container which cracks during his impact. As he laid there on the floor, Mirko just smiled to herself. Mirko, I guess you were nothing but talk, huh? As Mirko looked at him with her cocky smile, she suddenly saw him beginning to pick himself up, which made her smile fade away as he then the right back up on his feet and looked towards Mirko. As the two looked towards one another, Mirko noticed that Deku's jaw has been dislocated. Mirko, huh, looks like you're not so indestructible after all. From hearing that, Deku noticed his jaw dangling, so he grabbed hold of me and popped it back into place with ease, which was quite shocking to see for Mirko. Mirko, you have to be kidding me. What in the hell are you? Deku, I am Specimen. I am Alpha. With that said, Deku got on all fours and began making his way towards Mirko, who also began making her way towards him. As they then clashed with one another, Deku slashed his right claw straight towards her, but she managed to block by raising up her strong left leg. From doing so, she then kicked him in the chest with their other leg, pushing him a bit further back. After being pushed back, Deku looked towards the direction where Mirko was, but didn't see her there anymore. Mirko looking for me. Hearing that, Deku turned his head towards his left, where he was then kicked right in the center of his face, sending him flying back once more. As he hit the ground, Mirko also planted her feet back onto the ground and looked straight towards Deku, who was beginning to pick himself up. Mirko, you know, you disappoint me. I thought I was going to have a real fight for once, but I guess I was wrong, so let me put you out of your worthless misery. With that said, Mirko jumped into the air and spun in the circle until eventually she raised her right leg and came straight down with the axe kick. As soon as she came straight down, she is certain as she put an end to Deku, but as soon as the dust began to clear up from her kick, she saw that the heel of her foot was embedded in the ground and not in Deku's head. Seeing this, she couldn't believe that her own kick missed her target. Deku, looking for me? From hearing that voice behind her, Mirko quickly pulls her heel out of the ground and turned around as she attempted to jump back. But in her attempt, she was then grabbed by her face. With her face being grabbed, she saw Deku, who was the one grabbing hold of her. As she looked at him, she tried breaking free from his grasp by trying to pry his fingers off of her face. But as Mirko attempted this, she couldn't budge a single finger, and the more she tried to forcefully pry his fingers off of her face, the more his grip began getting tighter, which made his claws slowly sink into her skin. Mirko, you damn monster. Let go of me. And in act of desperation, she raised both of her legs up and kicked him in the stomach, which made her break free from his grasp but injuring her face in the process. As she landed back on the ground, she placed her fingers against the right side of her face, where she felt 4 deep cuts on her face and even felt a single deep cut on side left of her cheek. After feeling the cuts, she then put her hand down and looked over Deku, who stood only a few meters away from her. She looked at him with anger in her eyes, and is completely erased at him and herself for not finishing this sooner. Mirko, all right, enough games, I'm going to end this here and now. With that said, she firmly planted both of her feet on the ground and placed her fingertips on the ground as well. From doing so, she then launched herself straight towards Deku. As she got close to him, she performed an upwards kick towards his chin. But right when her kick was about to hit him, he pulled his head back, making her kick go up as it was only a few inches away from him. From her kick missing, she then firmly planted both hands to the ground and pushed herself up into the air and going over Deku's head and landing behind him as well. Doing this, she quickly took this opportunity to attack Deku from behind with one of her side kicks to his head. But once again, as her kick was about to hit his head, he soon ducked down, making it fly over his head. From ducking downwards, he then turned his body and sweep her other leg, which began to make her fall to the ground. But she quickly acted by placing both of her hands on the ground and do a cartwheel to place her back on her feet again. Seeing this, Deku stood up and began sprinting at her. Seeing him coming, Mirko was preparing another kick, but Deku was so fast that he was already in her face, so instead of throwing a kick, she threw a left hook straight towards his face, which actually hit him. Seeing that, she switched from kicks to punches, so she punched him left and right over and over again until she felt her own knuckles beginning to hurt. Her right when she threw a right hook. Deku then grabbed her fist. See that, Mirko looked at him with fury in her eyes. Mirko, why won't you just go down? After saying that, she raised her left leg and kicked him away. After doing so, she then raised up her right leg and attempted to kick Deku on the side of his face. But right when her kick was about to hit his face, he soon grabbed hold of her ankle, which he then looked at and opened in his jaws as he then bit down on her calf and tore off a large chunk of it. From having such a large chunk ripped out of her calf, Mirko let out a loud scream which echoed throughout the entire underground laboratory. After that, Deku let of Mirko's ankle and placed his left hand onto his right shoulder and grabbed hold of her left ear. Doing so, he opened his jaws and attempted to bite her neck, but before he could, Mirko placed her hands on his face and was trying to push him away, but as she was trying her best to push him off, Deku's strength was so much stronger than hers, that he was now getting inches closer to her neck. To Mirko, "Get off," saying that she raises her left leg and placed it onto his chest, which she then began pushing him off, but as she was pushing him off, she can feel his claws tearing off some of the flesh from her shoulder and can feel half of her ear beginning to rip off. But she bared through the pain she bared until finally she kicked him off, but in the loss of half of her ear and a chunk of flesh from her shoulder. But throughout that loss she knew she made it out, so after doing so she quickly placed her good leg back onto the ground and began hopping away. Doing so, she placed her fingers up against her right ear and began contacting help. "Mirko. This is Mirko. I need help, I'm gravely injured," and before Mirko can say much more, she was then kicked on the side her side, which sent flying to the container that Deku hit earlier on. But this time in her impact she breaks through the glass and ends up inside the container. After being kicked inside, she attempted to pick herself up, but soon felt a sharp pain on the right side of her ribs. From feeling that, she looked down and saw a large piece of glass deep inside of her. After seeing that, she then heard glass break, which made her look ahead and see Deku entering the container as he then gets on all fours and begins to approach Mirko. Seeing this, she grabs a sharp piece of glass and points it at him. "Mirko, stay back." As Deku got closer, he then grabbed her wrist and slammed it against the other side of the glass. After doing so, he then opened his jaws once more and began getting closer to her neck. Seeing this, Mirko's entire life began flashing through her eyes. Seeing that, she steals her eyes shut as tears begin to fall down her cheeks. But right when Deku was so close to biting her neck, something wrapped around his neck and pulled him away from her. One Endeavor. Mirko. Hearing her hero name being Mirko opens her eyes and saw Endeavor, Present Mike, and Eraserhead, who is pulling Deku by his neck. Seeing the three of them, she felt relief. Aizawa. This Nomu here, it's so strong. As Aizawa was trying to hold back Deku, he didn't know he was so strong as he was trying to pull himself forward. Present Mike. Eraser, make sure you hold him still. As Present Mike said that, he raised his right arm up and shout out the weakness from the wrist guard at him. But as the liquid was getting close, a Nomu dropped down from above and shielded Deku as it was then hit by the liquid, which then began to burn a hole through its chest, making it roar out of pain until eventually falling to his knees and dying. Seeing this, Deku was shocked but yet very angry to see a Nomu be killed right in front of him. So he reached both hands behind him and grabbed onto Aizawa's sash, which he then yanked upwards, pulling Aizawa up into the air and slamming him on top of Present Mike. After doing so, he rips the sash around his neck and stares at the heroes in front of him, but as he stared at them, the other Nomus who were in the shadows observing the fight between Deku and Mirko, came out and stood right behind. Looking at the amount of Nomu, Endeavor knew that they couldn't take them all down on their own, so he began thinking of a way to get out of the situation, but unexpectedly the four heroes and Deku heard a voice shout out a name. Bakugo. Deku. Suddenly dropping from above was Bakugo, who landed on the ground and looked over at Deku. Afterwards, he then made his way over to Deku, but in his approach one of the Nomu wanted to attack him, but Deku raised his left arm preventing it to do anything. And after doing so, Bakugo was finally face to face with Deku. Bakugo. Izuku, I'm sorry that I'm late, I'm here now to save you. Deku remains silent as he just looks Bakugo. Bakugo. Still don't remember me, do you? With a sad look, Bakugo looks down as he clenches his fist, but he then raises his head back at Deku. Bakugo. Listen to me, Izuku, you're not the monsters they say you are, you're Izuku Midoriya, my friend who I need to save. For as Bakugo said that, even slowly begin to reach inside of his left grenade gauntlet, which Deku sees as a threat and quickly grabs Bakugo by the neck and lift him up. Bakugo. Izuku, please just let me show you who you are. Even from him asking that, Deku was not going to let go of Bakugo no matter what. So as his grip began getting tighter around his neck, Bakugo was beginning to lose consciousness due to the lack of air, but before you can strangle him to death, Kirishima ran out of the shadows and slammed his hardened arm onto Deku's arm, breaking it on impact, which freed Bakugo. So from that, Kirishima grabbed Bakugo and ran over to the pro heroes. From him doing so, Deku looked over at them all and raised his broken arm, which instantly healed, and pointed at them all. Deku, kill them all. With that said, all of the Nomu let out roars and screeches as they then begin running towards the heroes. But at the same time, and this was happening, Dr. Garaki was finishing his work of making Shigaraki into the next All-for-One. Dr. Garaki. Done. With that said, he pressed a button down on his keyboard, opening the large container which had Shigaraki. As the purple liquid drained out and he fell to the ground, he began to pick himself up slowly until eventually standing on his own 2 feet. Standing there, he looked towards the direction where Deku and the Nomu were and let out a large aura, which begins to reach Deku and the Nomu. Feeling that aura, all of the Nomu who were running straight towards the heroes suddenly stopped as they've done looked back at the direction where Shigaraki. Deku. Shigaraki. Hearing Deku said, the heroes were shocked to know that Shigaraki was so close but yet so far from their grasp. So instead of making their way to him, they instead begin making their way back to the entrance. But as they were doing this, Shigaraki sensed this, so he raised his hand and slammed it down to the ground, which began to disintegrate everything in its path, even killing the Dr. Garaki since he was the closest. Hearing the disintegration, Deku and all the Nomu begin running. But while they're running, the ground was disintegrating way too quickly, and I was killing off some of the Nomu that were lingering behind. As the other Nomu saw this, they knew that they wouldn't all survive, especially their offer. So one of them let out a loud screech which called the flying Nomu that entered the underground laboratory through one of the holes that Nomu dug upwards from earlier. It flew straight towards the Nomu. One of them grasped hold of Deku and threw him straight towards the flying Nomu, which grabbed hold of him midair and began flying to the nearest hole. But as the flying Nomu taking Deku away, he reached his hand out to all the other Nomu as he then saw them beginning to disintegrate one by one, until eventually the flying Nomu found a hole and flew upwards, taking him to the surface and up to the air, where you then see the entire area where the underground laboratory and the building were located completely gone now. Before the building and the surrounding area was completely destroyed, Hawks managed to save a few heroes, including Endeavor, Mirko, Present Mike, Eraserhead, Bakugo, Kirishima, and many more, but he wasn't able to save as many heroes as he wanted. So at the heavy heart he left to the destruction of Shigaraki. Once all the destruction stopped, though, Hawks brought the heroes safely down to the ground. Doing so, his remaining feathers came back to him. Hawks, is everyone all right? Aizawa, we're, but I can't say that about some of the people here. Hearing Aizawa say that, Hawks looks at all the other heroes and sees that some of them have been injured during the fight against the Nomu. Especially Mirko, who's obtained the most injuries out of everyone there. Mirko. Shit. That hurts. Mirko yells out as Endeavor was cauterizing her wounds with his flames. Endeavor. Stop moving. I'm trying to close up the wounds. Mirko. Easy for you to say when you're not the one getting burned. After painful few minutes, Endeavor eventually finished, but Mirko passed out due to the pain. But even after cauterizing her wounds, Endeavor knew that she needed medical treatment quickly before her wounds getting infected. So you picked her up once more and went over to Hawks. Endeavor. Hawks, I need you to take Mirko and all the injured heroes back to base camp. He says that as he hands Mirko over to Hawks. Hawks. All right, but what about you guys? Endeavor, we're staying here to go fight Shigaraki. Hawks, I see, he does want me to come back and help you. Endeavor, no, I've noticed that you've obtained some injuries yourself, so it's best that you stay at the base camp as well. Hawks, all right then, you be careful out there. Endeavor. No promises, now go. With that said, Hawks expanded his wings and shot out a few of his feathers towards the injured heroes, picking them up off their feet. After doing so, he flew up into the sky with Mirko in his arms and began flying towards base camp with all the other injured heroes. Once he left with all the injured heroes, Endeavor looked toward the direction they all came from. Looking towards there, he saw Bakugo making his way towards there. Endeavor. You. Hearing Endeavor say that, Bakugo stops and turns around to look at him. Endeavor. Do you mind telling me where exactly you are going? As Bakugo looked at Endeavor with the very serious look in his eyes, he told him exactly what he was going. Bakugo. To go save my friend. Endeavor, your friend? Hearing Bakugo say that, Endeavor was confused until eventually he remembered his interaction with Deku back at the underground lab. Endeavor, are you talking about that monster that could have killed you back there? Bakugo, he's not a monster, he's my friend and I'm going to make sure I save him. Endeavor, you sound completely foolish. I understand that Nomu were once human before, but they no longer are. They are nothing but monsters, creatures that need to be exterminated, especially the one you call friends. Hearing that come out of Endeavor's mouth, Bakugo began to heat up out of anger, so as he was about to make his way over towards him to get in his face, Kirishima soon intervened by placing his hand on his chest, stopping him from doing something that he might regret. Kirishima, Bakugo, I know you don't want to hear it, but I don't think we can save your friend anymore. Bakugo, the hell did you say? Bakugo pushes Kirishima away from him out of anger from what he said. Kirishima, I'm sorry Bakugo, I just had to say it. To Bakugo, you damn bastard, and here I thought we were supposed to work together in this. Kirishima, face it Bakugo, your friend that you once knew is gone. There's nothing left of him, so stop now before you get yourself killed. Bakugo, shut up. Bakugo charges Kirishima and begins igniting small sparks from the palm of his hands, but before he can get closer, he was then grabbed by a sash and pulled back by Aizawa. After being pulled and hitting the ground, Aizawa placed his foot on Bakugo's chest, to prevent him from getting up. Aizawa. That's enough Bakugo. Bakugo, shut up and get off me. As Bakugo raised his left hand to use an explosion on his teacher, Aizawa soon used his quirk to deactivate Bakugo's quirk. Aizawa, listen here Bakugo, I know exactly how it feels to lose a good friend to the forces of evil, trust me I do. It hurts like hell seeing the person that you knew so well becoming something you never imagined to see them as, and I do understand that you wish to save that person, but I'm sorry to tell you that it's probably too late to do that. One Bakugo. No, it's not too late, I have to save my friends. Sniffling. I have to bring Izuku back home. Bakugo then began to tear up, not wanting to accept the fact that it's too late to try to save Deku. Aizawa. I'm sorry, but I don't think your friend can come home. Saying that, Aizawa unwrapped his sash from Bakugo and stepped away from him. Doing so, Bakugo then placed both hands over his eyes to try to hide his tears. Seeing this, Kirishima goes over to Bakugo to comfort him. Endeavor, all right, any hero that can still fight come with me, we're going to end this. Saying that Endeavor began making his way towards the direction where Shigaraki is. As he did this, one by one heroes began following him. Aizawa, Kirishima. Kirishima, yes Mr. Aizawa? Aizawa, keep an eye on Bakugo. Kirishima, I will. Hearing that from Kirishima, Aizawa turned away from them and began joining the other heroes. Near the rubble around the rubble of the building, the flying Nomu was circling the area with Deku in his talons. But while they were circling around the area, they soon see a Nomu digging its way out of the rubble. Seeing that, Deku orders the flying Nomu to go down. Doing so, they both land on the ground and Deku begins to run over towards the Nomu. While running, Deku sees the Nomu reaching out his left hand towards him. So once Deku got close, he reached out his right hand to grab the Nomu's hand. But once he grabbed hold of the Nomu's hand, and then disintegrated into ashes. Seeing this, Deku falls to his knees and looks at the ashes of the Nomu. Deku. Why? Why? Suddenly Deku then felt something running down from his eyes and down his cheeks. Feeling this, he runs his left fingers against his cheeks and looks at them afterwards. From doing so, he sees that they are wet and understand that they are tears. Deku. Crying. As more tears begin to come down from his eyes. He then felt an aching pain in his heart. Feeling these things, he understands that he's experiencing the feeling of sadness, which he has been told by Kurogiri, who taught him about this emotion. And for feeling this emotion for the very first time, Deku felt completely hurt. He felt so hurt that he looked up to the sky and let out a yell. After that yell, he then heard his fellow Nomu roar out from a distance, but instead of it sounding like a monstrous roar, it sounded more likely saddened roar. After that, Deku sensed Shigaraki very close by, so he picked himself up and looked towards the direction he senses him from. Looking towards that direction, he covers his face with his shell quirk and his class come out. With that, he gets on all fours and begin heading towards Shigaraki. As the fighting began with Shigaraki and the heroes, Bakugo and Kirishima were completely far from the fight due to Kirishima watching over Bakugo, who was sitting against the tree and about Deku. Bakugo. Hey Kirishima. Kirishima. What's up Bakugo? Bakugo. Do you think if I was a nicer person, Izuku would have never became a Nomu? Kirishima. I don't know, do you actually think that would have changed everything? Bakugo. Maybe. After Bakugo said that, they then begin to hear a numerous amount of explosions from the direction where Shigaraki and the heroes are fighting. Kirishima. Oh man, it sounds like things are getting hectic out there, don't you think so Bakugo? Looking back at Bakugo, Kirishima sees that he's the least interested on what's happening at the moment. Seeing this, he decides to kneel down to comfort him by placing his left hand on his right shoulder. Kirishima. Hey, I know you were dead set helping your friends, but you got to face the fact that we can't save him. Bakugo. I know, I'm just feeling some regret right now, for what I did to him back then. Sigh. I just wish I can apologize. Suddenly they then heard branches breaking close by, which grabbed their attention. From looking towards that direction they soon see the headless Nomu, who walked out from the trees and looks at Bakugo and Kirishima, who also look back at it. After the two looked at the Nomu, they were deciding if they should or should not fight it. But before they can make a decision, the Nomu turned towards the direction of Shigaraki and the heroes and began making its way over to them. As the Nomu then left, Bakugo got up from the ground and began looking towards the direction where the Nomu was walking towards. Doing so, he thought of Deku. I had a feeling he was heading towards there as well. So have you took a step forward? Kirishima soon intervened by stepping in front of him. Kirishima. Whoa there buddy, what do you think you're going? Bakugo. I'm following the Nomu. If I do that, then I'll find Izuku. Kirishima. You still think you can save him? Bakugo. I don't know, but I'll decide when I see him, if I either want to try to save him or put him down. Kirishima. Even if you choose your decision here, I'm still not letting you go anywhere. Bakugo. Sigh. If that's the case, then I'm sorry. Kirishima. Sorry about what, Bakugo? This. Saying that, Bakugo grabs hold of Kirishima's face and trips one of his legs, which makes Bakugo slam him to the ground, where you then lets out an explosion from the palm of his hand into Kirishima's face. After doing so, Bakugo removes his hand from Kirishima's face and see that he's out cold. After that, he then looked towards the direction where the Nomu is heading. Bakugo. I'm coming for Izuku. Other side of the forest. While Shigaraki was fighting the heroes, the rest of the League of Villain members were by the edge of the forest looking towards the direction where they see explosions from the distance. Dabi. Well, it looks like Shigaraki is in the middle of a fight over there. Mr. Compress. Do you think we should go and help him? Dabi. No, seeing what he did to this entire area, it's best that we don't get involved. Twice. Yeah, I agree with Dabi, but I want to fight some heroes. Dabi. Anyways, let's get out of here before Shigaraki decide to destroy the area again. As all the other League of Villain members begin to walk away, Toga was still looking horizon, which Twice's attention. Twice, Toga. From Twice saying her name, the others look back at Toga. Twice goes ahead and walks over to her and places his hand on her left shoulder. Twice. Hey Toga, we got to get out of here, Toga. I know, but I'm worried about Beastie. Dabi. He's probably fine, it's going to take more than all that to kill him. Toga. Yeah, but didn't you guys hear those roars? Spinner. Of course we did, even the few Nomu that got us out of there did the same thing, before they then went towards that direction. Toga. I don't know if I'm completely sure, but didn't you guys think they sounded really sad? Mr. Compress. Now that you mention it, it did sound like that, like a pack of wolves howling for a loss of a pack member. Dabi. What does that have to do with anything that's happening right now? Toga. I don't know, but I'm 100% sure that I heard Beastie yell before all the other Nomu roared. Spinner. So what does that mean? Toga. It means he could be hurt. Twice. Hurt. But he's like indestructible. Toga. I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about emotionally. Saying that, Toga begins thinking about Deku and how worried she has become from hearing his yell, so without listening time she begins running towards the direction where Shigaraki and the heroes are. Twice. Toga, where are you going? Toga. I'm going to Beastie. Hearing this, Twice decides to go with her, but as he was about to run over to her, Dabi grabs hold of his arm. Dabi, what do you think you're going? Twice. With Toga, we can't just let it go off on her own, she could get hurt. Dabi, that's her choice to make. Hearing Dabi say that, Twice pulls his own arm and breaks free from Dabi's grasp. Twice, how could you just say that? Toga is our friend and so is Specimen, he saved us back there and it's only fair we return the favor. Saying all that to Dabi, Twice turns his back on him and begins following after Toga. As he did so, Mr. Compress and Spinner agreed with everything that Twice said and began following them as well. As Dabi stood there looking at them run towards danger, he let out a sigh as even shook his head in disapproval. Dabi, idiots. From saying that, Dabi then begins following after them as well for agreeing with Twice's words as well. During the big fight the heroes were getting overwhelmed by Shigaraki's new abilities. But even so they kept fighting no matter what. The heroes kept throwing everything they had at him but no matter what. Shigaraki was way too powerful and even Endeavor was having trouble trying to fight him as he shot out flames from the palm of his hands to try to hit him as he was floating above them as he shot out spear-like projectiles out of his fingertips. Many of the heroes managed to dodge his projectile but some were injured by it piercing through their legs or upper body. Seeing his fellow heroes getting injured, Aizawa began using his quirk on Shigaraki, which disabled all of his quirks and his usage, making them fall to the ground. But even from falling from such a height he manages to pick himself up and look over at Aizawa, who has his eyes wide open. Seeing him do this, Shigaraki knew he needed to take him out quickly before he can continue his onslaught. So as he turned towards Aizawa to go and kill him, Present Mike soon appeared right next to Aizawa. He let out a loud yell which launched Shigaraki back and into a pile of rubble. After doing so he stopped using his quirk, but so did Aizawa, who couldn't keep his eyes open anymore as he sealed them shut and placed his hand over them. Present Mike sees this and quickly checks up on him. Present Mike, hey, you all right? Aizawa, yeah, I'm fine, I just need my eye drops. So as Aizawa reached his right hand into his pocket to grab his eye drops, Shigaraki suddenly bursted out the rubble and launched himself straight towards Aizawa and Present Mike with his left hand reaching out to them. Present Mike sees him coming and was about to use quirk again, but Endeavor soon showed up and punched Shigaraki on the right side of his face, sending him flying towards his left. After punching him, Endeavor looked over at Aizawa and Present Mike. Endeavor, Eraserhead, I'm going to need you to use your quirk on him again, but this time for much longer. Do you think you can do that? Aizawa, why yeah I can. Aizawa says that as he finally pulls out his eye drops and begins to use it on his eyes. Endeavor, good, I'm counting on you. With that said, Endeavor then launched himself straight up into the air towards Shigaraki. As soon as he landed back onto the ground, Shigaraki began picking himself up. So Endeavor raised his right hand towards his direction and shot out a large blast of flames which fully engulfed him. But as he kept shooting his flames, Shigaraki bursted out of the flames as he went towards Endeavor with pieces of his skin burned and his hair partly singed. Even from those injuries he still had this great strength. So as he was heading towards Endeavor he reached out his right hand and grabbed hold of his face. But as his hand was on his face nothing was happening. Seeing this, Shigaraki glanced over Endeavor's shoulder right and saw Aizawa using his quirk again. Endeavor, looks like we both can't use our quirks. As Endeavor said that, he then grabbed hold of Shigaraki's wrist and pulled his hand away from his face. Doing so he then grabbed him by the neck and raised them up into the air, which he then slammed him straight to the ground. After doing so Endeavor then began punching Shigaraki in the face over and over again. But while he was doing this, Aizawa was struggling to keep his eyes open. Luckily Present Mike was standing next to him and was ready to give him some eye drops. All right before he could, a black blur suddenly appeared and slashed Aizawa's right foot clean off. So as it begins to fall, Present Mike reached his arms up to grab him. But before he could, his face was then grabbed and he was run straight to the ground. What he was then knocked out. The impact of his head being slammed to the ground makes a loud sound which Endeavor hears and turns around to see Deku letting go of Present Mike's face. I'm beginning to stand over him and Aizawa, who began wailing in pain due to losing his foot. As Endeavor continued looking at Deku he notices his arm and realizes it's the exact same arm that he had a possession. 1. Endeavor, it's you. From Endeavor saying that, Deku then turned his head and looked over at him. As their eyes looked with one another, Endeavor quickly raised his right arm and aimed the Nomu's weakness at him, but right when he was about to shoot it out, something pierces through his backing out of his stomach. As he looked down he noticed that it was the spirit-like projectiles. Shigaraki, hee, looks like quirks are back on. After saying that, Shigaraki launched Endeavor up into the air where he then slammed him back onto the ground. After doing so he retracted his spears back into his fingers. Shigaraki, well, that's been taken care of. Shigaraki then looked around. He noticed that all the other heroes he did injured are now facing down on the ground with large scratch marks on their bodies. Seeing that he looked over at Deku and grins at him. Shigaraki, you did a good job, specimen. From being praised from what he did, Deku remains silent as he looked at Shigaraki. From him being silent, Shigaraki quickly takes notice of this. Shigaraki, what's the matter, specimen? Deku, other Nomu, all dead. You kill them. Shigaraki, ah, I see, my quirk must have killed all those other Nomu. Well, there's nothing that could be done now. Hearing this, Deku lowers his head as he begins to think about all the other Nomu who sacrificed their lives to save him. Shigaraki, come, specimen, let's go. Without a word, Deku begins to follow Shigaraki orders as he begins to approach him, but as he was doing so, something suddenly landed across from Deku and Shigaraki. As they turned their heads towards that direction they then saw a cloud of dust which then began to blow away to reveal Bakugo standing there as he looked at the two. Shigaraki, well, look who it is, Katsuki Bakugo. As Bakugo looked around he noticed all the heroes were all completely injured. Shigaraki, so have you came here to stop me as well? Bakugo, yeah, I have, but before I get to you, I want to face him. 1. Saying that, Bakugo raises his right hand and points at Deku, who Shigaraki then glances over at and glances back at Bakugo afterwards. Shigaraki, ah, so you want to face against your old friend now, huh? Bakugo, yeah, I do. Shigaraki, very well, this fight can only end with the other opponent dead. Bakugo, all right then, bring it. Hearing Bakugo say that, Shigaraki smirks as he then looked over at Deku. Shigaraki, specimen, kill him. Hearing those orders, Deku then began to approach Bakugo, who even eventually stood meters apart from him. As the two looked at one another they begin preparing themselves to fight and kill. Bakugo, come on Deku, show me what you got. Deku then begins sprinting straight towards Bakugo. But as he was getting closer, Bakugo raised his right arm and grabbed hold of the pin of his grenade gauntlet which he was aiming at Deku. As soon as he got close he pulled the pin, let me know a large explosion, which sent Deku flying up into the air until eventually hitting the ground and rolling in his impact. After being hit by a very large explosion he began to pick himself up, but before he could get back onto his feet, Bakugo bursted out of the smoke of the explosion from above and came straight down to Deku, shot an explosion from the palm of his hand at him, making him launch to a pile of rubble which he was embedded in, so he attempted to pull himself out. Bakugo soon stopped him by peering in front of them and shooting out multiple explosions. Bakugo, come on Deku, I thought you were some sort of dangerous monster. As Bakugo shot out many explosions, Deku's shell quirk began to rip away with every explosion, until eventually the shell that was covering his face was now completely blown off, exposing his face, which caused Bakugo to stop to look at the face he knew very well. Bakugo, Deku. Seeing that, Bakugo begins to remember the day he last saw him as Izuku Midoriya. Months ago. At school ended, Deku was at his locker putting on his shoes so he can go home, but once he had his shoes on, two of Bakugo's friends grabbed hold of him and brought him to the back of the school where a shed is. During their arrival, Bakugo was there with a piece of paper in his hand. Friend, hey Bakugo, we got him. Bakugo, good. Bakugo's friends then forced him onto his knees and held his arm so he wouldn't try to get up. After they did this to him, Bakugo then approached Deku and saw the piece of paper he was holding it in his hand. Bakugo, do you want to explain what this is, Deku? Looking at the paper he sees that it's an essay that he personally wrote. Deku, that's my essay of what I want to be. Bakugo, that's right, I snatched it off the teacher's desk after class and read it. It says here you want to be hero like All Might. Answer me this, Deku, how can a damn quirkless loser, nobody like you could ever be a hero? Deku, with hard work and dedication. Bakugo, you're going to need more than that, especially a quirk. Saying that, Bakugo then tears Deku's essay in half in front of him. After doing so, he drops the two pieces on the ground, which then blows away from the wind. Bakugo, now that that's taken care of, I think it's time that I personally put you in your place. With that said, Bakugo punched Deku across the face and began beating him profusely without holding back a single punch. Eventually, once the beating was over, Deku was curled up on the ground crying, with Bakugo staring down at him. Deku, get this through your head, Deku, you'll never be a hero. Bakugo then turned away and began walking away from Deku. One of his friends follows as the other grabs hold of his backpack and opens it, which he then dumped everything inside on top of him. After doing so, he then dropped his backpack on top of Deku, and began to leave with Bakugo. Present. Back then, Bakugo thought it was right to do that to Deku since he was powerless and weak, but now he regrets it, because seeing what his friend has become is something that he would have never wished for. Bakugo mind. Izuku. As Bakugo began to reach his hand towards Deku, he was then kicked in the stomach by Deku, who pulled his leg out from the rubble. Unlocked from being kicked, he was launched back, so Deku pulled himself out of the rubble and began sprinting straight towards Bakugo, who saw him coming. So he prepared himself to fight him again by raising his hands up and shooting out multiple explosions. But from being hit by a few of the explosions, Deku managed to break through them all and reach Bakugo, who he then begins striking out with his sharp cloth. But as he did so, Bakugo blocking his attacks with his grenade gauntlets, which were getting damaged with each scratch he does. But seeing that he's not doing any physical damage to him, he stops his scratching and instead grabs hold of him as he then slams from straight to the ground, and from doing so he was left wide open. So Deku grabbed hold of his face and opened his jaws widely to attempt to bat off his space, but Bakugo quickly reacts and places his hand on Deku's face to hold him back, but as he was trying to hold him back, Deku's strength was a bit overwhelming. 1. Bakugo. Damn it, get off me. Yelling that out, then shout out an explosion from the palm of his hand, which made Deku let go of his face but leaving some deep scratch marks behind. But to Bakugo that wasn't something to worry about right now, so he pulled back his legs and then kicked Deku back. Doing so, Bakugo picked himself back up. I noticed his gauntlets were no longer a usage, so he took them off and threw them to the ground. Around the same time he did this, Deku kicked himself up and looked at Bakugo. Bakugo, come on, let's end this. Deku, right. So the two then run straight towards one another. As they were both getting close, they raised up their right arm, where they then sent it towards one another, with Bakugo's hand wide open to shoot on an explosion, and suddenly clenches it into a fist, which he then punches Deku across the face. But around the same time, Bakugo punched Deku face across the face. Deku slashed across Bakugo's body, doing more damage than his punch, and from that Bakugo fell to his knees and placed his hands over his body, where he noticed he was bleeding profusely. Bakugo. Damn it. As Bakugo looked up, he saw Deku looking down at him, which to him was ironic in this situation. Bakugo. Huh, looks like I'm the one on my knees to you now. Deku doesn't say a word and just continues looking at Bakugo. Bakugo. Listen, Izuku, you aren't a monster, you're. As Bakugo began to reach into his left sleeve, Deku raised his right hand up and straightened his fingers, where he then sent it straight towards Bakugo's face. For right when he was inches away from piercing his head, he stopped once Bakugo showed him the picture of them when they were kids. Bakugo, you're my friend and I'm sorry for everything that I did to you, and said, this isn't you, this kid in this picture, that's the real you, Izuku Midoriya. 3. Hearing everything Bakugo said, Deku then pulls back his hand and reaches to grab the picture instead. All right, when he was about to grab the picture, Bakugo was then pierced in the stomach. Deku sees this and turns around to see Shigaraki with his right arm and with the spears coming out of his fingers. Shigaraki. Well, it seemed that's done and over with. After saying that, he retracts his spears back into his fingers, letting Bakugo fall to the ground. Shigaraki. Come on, specimen, let's take our leave. Even from hearing that, Deku looks back at Bakugo and sees that he's still holding the picture in his hand, so he bends down and grabs the picture, where he then begins to look at it and replace every word that Bakugo told him. Deku, I am Izuku Midoriya. Saying that very name for the very first time, Deku begins to see a flood of memories running through his mind until eventually he realizes who he finally is. Deku, I'm Izuku Midoriya. As Deku looked down, he saw Bakugo lying there. Deku, Kachan. 5. After looking at him he looks at his own hands and remembers what he has done with these hands. Deku, oh god. As Deku was on the edge of freaking out, he then heard the voice that has been controlling him the entire time. Shigaraki, specimen, let's go. As Deku turned his head around he saw Shigaraki standing there, and remembered that he was the one controlling him this entire time, so he calmed himself down as he then turned to face Deku. Tamura Shigaraki, you did this. Shigaraki. What? For the very first time, Shigaraki heard Deku speak without shortening words. Shigaraki, specimen, what's going on with you? Deku. My name is not Specimen, it's Izuku Midoriya, and all that I've done is because of you. I know the doctor was the one to make me, but you are the one to make me into the monster I am now. Shigaraki. See now, so you're not Specimen anymore, you're the kid that the doctor accidentally killed. Well, I guess it's nice to meet you, Izuku Midoriya. Now tell me, what are you going to do? Try to go back to a normal life that's now gone, or are you going to come with me and follow orders like how you used to? Deku. I'll take the third option. Shigaraki. Third option. Deku. Yeah, and that's to kill you. Saying that, Deku rushed straight towards Shigaraki, who then extended his arm out and shut up his spears from his fingertips. But as he was heading straight towards his direction, he quickly dodged it and began running on all fours, which made him much faster. Seeing this, Shigaraki began retracting his spears, but before you can fully retract them back, Deku was already so close that he swiped his left arm up, slicing Shigaraki's right arm off with his sharp claws. From having his arm cut off just now, he fought off the pain. So seeing that Deku was close, he reached his left hand out. Deku sees this and tries to back away, but was grabbed by the arm, which he breaks away easily, but from doing so he notices the lower half of his arm is disintegrating and was slowly reaching up to his shoulder. So he grabs hold of his bicep and tears off his own arm, which you then tossed away and let disintegrate as it fell to the ground. After doing so he grew back another arm. Shigaraki sees this and tries to grab hold of him again, but in a different place. But right when he extended his left hand out, Deku soon grabbed him by the wrist and bent it upwards, breaking the bone and letting it stick out from his skin. From that he lets out a scream, but was then silenced once Deku punched him right in his face, which sent him flying back and hitting the ground on impact. So as he began to try pick himself up, Deku soon appeared and slammed his left foot on Shigaraki's right knee, shattering it on impact. After that, Deku kneeled down by slamming his right knee on Shigaraki's chest, which cracked a few ribs. Deku then raised his right arm up and straightened his fingers way, then launched them straight towards Shigaraki's head, but he stops only inches away from his head. Shigaraki. Well, aren't you going to kill me? Deku. No, I'm not. Saying that, Deku takes his knee off of Shigaraki's chest and steps away from him. Shigaraki. Why not? Deku. Because I'm not a monster, I'm Izuku Midoriya. With that said, Deku turned his back to Shigaraki and began walking away from him, but as he walked away, Shigaraki began laughing. 2. Shigaraki. Ha ha ha, who are you kidding? You'll always be a monster, nothing else. Hearing this, Deku stops as he then looked over his shoulder to look at Shigaraki one last time. Deku. I'm not the monster, you're the monster. Saying, what do you want to say? Deku began to walk away, while Shigaraki stared at him. But while he was walking away, the headless Nomu suddenly appeared right in front of Deku, which made Shigaraki grin. Shigaraki. Hee, kill that fake Nomu. As Deku looked up to see the headless Nomu looking down at him, he smiled. Just from this simple act, the headless Nomu then stepped out of his way and let him walk past, which angered Shigaraki. Shigaraki. What are you doing? Kill him. The headless Nomu turns its back as it then begins following Deku. And as they both continue walking ahead, Nomus began appearing and following Deku. Shigaraki. You damn beasts. All of you will die. I will personally find each and every one of you and kill you. As Shigaraki yelled out to Deku and the Nomu, the elite members were standing on some rubble and witnessed everything that has happened. Dabi. Well, it looks like Shigaraki was the one in danger. Twice. What do we do? Mr. Compress. We should get Shigaraki and leave this place now. Spinner. That is the best choice to do. Dabi. All right then, let's get to it. As all the other being members begin to slide down the rubble to the ground, they noticed Toga, who was looking over at Deku and the Nomu. Dabi, Toga, are you coming? Toga, hey, what about Beastie? Mr. Compress, I'm sorry Toga, but it looks like he's no longer on our side, nor are the Nomu as well. Hearing this, Toga felt sad, knowing the friend she made is leaving without saying goodbye, not wanting to accept that. She slides down the rubble and lands on the ground, where she then begins running straight towards the Nomu. Twice, Toga, as Twice shouted out her name, me. Compressed grabbed him by the shoulder. Mr. Compressed, let her go, she was the closest with him after all. Twice, all right, so after running as fast as she could, she eventually reached Nomu, who she then began running past until reaching the front, where she sees Deku. Toga, Beastie. Hearing that name, Deku stops walking, which makes all the other Nomu stop walking as well. Doing so, he then turns around and begins to approach Toga. As soon as he was face to face with her, he smiled. Deku, hi Toga. Toga, Beastie, where are you going? Deku, somewhere safe where I and all these Nomu could live peacefully. Toga, but what about us? Deku, I'm sorry Toga, I really do want to stay here with the others and you, but the heroes and society won't accept me or the Nomu, that's why we have to go. Toga, but I don't want you to go. 1. As Toga lowered her head, Deku then went up to her and began hugging her, which she then began hugging him back as well. Deku, Toga, I'm happy that we met and that we became friends. Toga, I'm happy about that too. Izuku, you know you can come with me if you want. Hearing this, Toga looked up at Deku. Toga, really? Deku, yeah, but that's if you want of course. As Toga begins thinking about this, she then looked behind her and saw the others looking over. After doing so, she looked back at Deku and made her decision. Toga, I would like to go with you, but I belong here. Hearing that saddened Deku, but was happy for her to make her own choice. Deku, all right then, but just know, if you're ever in danger I'll come. Toga, thank you. After she stood up on her tippy toes and placed a kiss on his cheek, after that they then let go of one another. Toga, goodbye Beastie. Deku, goodbye Toga. So with that said, Deku turned away from her and began walking away along with the other Nomu into the forest. Kachan, Kachan, Kachan. Bakugo opened his eyes and sees a young Deku in front of him with his hand up. Deku, come on, it's late, your mom will be mad if you don't go back home. As Bakugo began looking around, he noticed that he was in the same park he used to play in when he was younger. He looked back at Deku and extended his hand out to him. Doing so, he sees that his own hand is much smaller than before. Bakugo's mind, my hand, it's so small. Deku pulls Bakugo up to his feet and begins pulling him along as they then began to leave the park. Bakugo's mind, wait a minute, I remember this. As Bakugo said this in his head, he finally realized that this was a memory from his past, way before he developed his quirk. Deku, hey Kachan, do you think we'll always be friends? Bakugo, of course, we'll always be friends. Hearing his younger self say that, Bakugo couldn't believe that he forgot he said that to Deku. Deku, great, then let's stay friends when we become here. As Deku said that, Bakugo suddenly opened his eyes widely and set up, has even reached out his left hand. Bakugo, Izuku. As Bakugo began to breathe heavily, he looked around the entire room and saw that he was in the hospital. He lowers his hand and finds out that it was all just a dream. Realizing that, he quickly jumped out of bed as he then at least his hospital room to get some answers of what happened. 1. But while leaving his room, he's doing bumped into his classmates who looked at him with wide eyes and shocked expressions. Bakugo, what are you all looking at? Amongst all of his classmates, Kirishima walks up to him and hugs him tightly. Kirishima, Bakugo, you have no idea how happy I am. Seeing him do this, Bakugo pushes him off. Why he's acting this way? Bakugo, what in the hell is the matter with you? What's going on here? Mina, do you know what happened to you? Bakugo, I remember having something pierced through my stomach, but that's it. Denki, then do you know what day it is? Bakugo, no I don't. As Bakugo said that, Kirishima placed his hand on his right shoulder. Kirishima, listen here buddy. When I'm about to tell you is something that I think you should sit down for. Bakugo, I don't need to take a seat, so just tell me. Kirishima, all right then, you've been in a coma for a month and a half now. The doctors told everyone that you had a small chance of waking up. Bakugo, what? If I've been out that long, then what happened while I was in that coma? Zero. Well, when you were not coma, the top pro heroes what quickly patched up and began taking their fight to the villains. Bakugo, what about the Nomu, Todoroki? They all disappeared. Bakugo, what do you mean they all disappeared? Uraraka, well, on the day that the heroes attacked the villains, Nomu suddenly stopped attacking the heroes and began going toward a certain direction. Tsuyu, some heroes reported that they saw a horde of those Nomu being led by a boy with green hair. Hearing that, Bakugo immediately knew that it was Deku. Bakugo, and what happened after that report? Momo, they were never seen since that day. The heroes tried searching for them, but there was no trace of them. They were completely gone without a single trace left behind. Hearing all of this, Bakugo could only guess that something happened between Deku and Shigaraki. Bakugo, then that means he's probably safe. As he said this, all of his other classmates were confused, but Kirishima knew exactly what he meant by that. Mitsuki, Katsuki, hearing that voice, Bakugo turned around and saw his mom and dad, who began running over to him, where they then embraced him in a big hug. Bakugo, Mom, Dad, Masaru, son, we're so happy that you're awake. Mitsuki, very happy. As his parents hugged him tighter, he then began to hug them back as well. A month later, once a month passed, Bakugo and his classmates returned to the battlefield alongside the pro heroes. Doing so, they took the fight straight to the villains, but after a few months later, all of the villains fell, including the League of Villains and All for One. But during their fall, one of the League of Villains members escaped the last fight and was never seen since then. That villain was Himiko Toga. 4 years later. 4 years have passed by now since the final fight between the heroes and villains. But over those years, people have had sightings of Nomu deep into the mountains and in thick forests. In the first sightings, the heroes decided to search for the Nomus to eradicate them. After months of their search, they did not find a single trace of any Nomu. So they stopped their search completely, all but one. Katsuki Bakugo. Once the heroes stopped their search, Bakugo began his without telling anyone. In the beginning of his search, he couldn't find a single trace of any type of Nomu. So he decided to talk to the people that claimed to see sightings of the Nomu. Hearing the people's story of their encounter with a Nomu, he decided to go to the places where they seen them and search there. Little by little in his search, he began to find things in certain areas, like handmade traps for small animals, tree stumps that had the trunk of the tree cleanly ripped off, and most importantly, a giant footprint left in the mud. Discovering these things, he traced them all back to a dense part of a forest in the mountain. So right before he went there, he brought someone important with him. Once they arrived at the area, Bakugo had the important person hang back as he went ahead. As he began going deeper and deeper into the dense forest, he began to see X's carved into some trees, which you either saw as a marking or as a warning, but he kept going no matter what. But as he kept going ahead, he eventually got tired and decided to take a break. So he sat down on the ground and reached behind him as he grabbed his water bottle we then began drinking from. After having a drink of water, he checked his watch and saw that it's been an hour now. Bakugo, it's only been an hour. Felt longer than that, but I still keep searching until heading back. With that said, Bakugo placed his water bottle back into his bag as he then got back up. But before he could take a single step, he then heard a twig's nod behind him. So he slowly turned around and saw a bear looking right at him. So while keeping eye contact with the bear, Bakugo silly reached over towards his right glove and began taking it off very slowly, so you can expose his hand and use his quirk to scare off the bear. But as he was halfways of taking off his glove, the bear suddenly began sprinting straight at him. So he pulled off his glove and began raising his hand up. But before you can raise it completely up, the bear then stood on its hind legs and was about to attack Bakugo. But right before it could, a loud roar was then heard, which made the bear go back on all fours as it then turned around and lower its head. Seeing the bear do this, Bakugo is a pro for head and sees the beak Nomu who escaped from Tartarus. Around the same time the Nomus disappeared. Looking at the beak Nomu, he sees that he's wearing a pelt around his body and holding a large spear with a stone arrowhead in its left hand. the beak Nomu goes over to bear and rubs its back. After doing so, the Nomu and the bear begin walking away from Bakugo. Bakugo, wait, saying that the Nomu stops as he then turns around to look at Bakugo. Bakugo, please, let me see Izuku. After he said this, the beak Nomu turned away from Bakugo and waved its right hand to tell Bakugo to follow him, which he understood, so the both of them begin walking through the big forest until eventually reaching a mountainside. As they stood there, the beak Nomu then began to slam its spear on the ground 3 times. From doing this, the stone of the mountainside began to roll open. Once it was fully open, it revealed the tunnel with the light shining at the end of it. The beak Nomu pointed its spear at the end of the tunnel, telling him to go through it. Bakugo, I see, thank you. As Bakugo took a single step forward, he then remembered about that special person, so he turned around to Nomu. Bakugo, there's someone else with me, could you bring them here as well? Nomu nods its head to Bakugo, thinks he then turns away from me and begins to walk through the tunnel. As it began walking deeper and deeper to the tunnel, the entrance he came in from shut. Eventually he reached the end of the tunnel and came out of the other side. After stepping out of the tunnel, he sees a large community of Nomu living together in huts. Seeing this, he begins to walk through a pathway which lets him see the large community of Nomu. As he continued walking to the pathway, he soon noticed a very large hut that had stairs leading up to it, and standing in front of it were the headless Nomu and the chainsaw Nomu. Once he reached the steps, the 2 Nomu suddenly kneeled down. Seeing this, Bakugo took a step back as he then heard a familiar voice. Deku, ha, so you finally found this. Hearing this, Bakugo looks up the steps into the entrance of the hut and sees Deku standing there. Bakugo, Izuku. Deku goes all the way down the steps and approaches Bakugo. As soon as the two were face to face, Bakugo immediately notices that Deku the same. Bakugo, Izuku, you look the same as the day I last saw you. Deku, well, that's because Nomus don't age at all. Bakugo, is that so? Well, no matter how you look like, I'm just so happy to see you. Saying that, Bakugo then opened his arms up and hugged Deku tightly. Being embraced by his old friend, Deku does the same as well. Deku, likewise, Kachan. 5. After hugging each other for at least a few minutes, they then let go of one another. Deku, so tell me, how have you been? Bakugo, pretty good. I graduated from UA, became a hero, and even started my own agency. Deku, that's great. Bakugo, I'm glad you think so, and I can see that you've done great things here. Deku, yeah, I guess I have, but I didn't do it alone. Bakugo, I can see that. These Nomu really made a life here for themselves, and it's all thanks to you. Deku, yeah, it is. Here we aren't slaves that can be simply commanding by orders, we are free to think and do what we wish. Bakugo, ha, spoken like a true leader. Deku, you think so? Bakugo, I know so. As the two smiled at one another, Bakugo remembered that he had something to tell. Bakugo, oh yeah, I want to tell you that I brought someone else with me. Deku, who? As Deku said that, he then heard a voice Richie hasn't heard in a very long time. Inko, Izuku. Hearing his own name being called out by that voice, he looked past Bakugo and saw his mom standing there. Deku, mom. Saying that, he runs past Bakugo as even hugs his mom tightly, who also hugs him back. Deku, mom, I can't believe it, you're actually here. Inko, well, of course, sweetie. Once Katsuki told me that he found you, so he had me come here, and the Nomu with the beak brought me here as well. Hearing this, Deku, he looks over his shoulder and smiles at Bakugo as he has some tears in his eyes. Deku, thank you, Kachan. Bakugo, you're welcome. As Deku hugged his mom for a bit longer, he soon let go, has even looked at her with a smile. Deku, mom, there's some people that are like to introduce you to. As Deku said that, he then looked up the stairs and to the entrance of the hut. Bakugo and Inko do the same as well, and who they see stepping out of the hut where Himiko Toga holding a baby and a 3-year-old boy holding on to her leg. 3. Deku, this is my family. From saying that, Deku goes over to the 3 of them and brings them down the steps. Deku, mom, this is my wife, Himiko Toga. 4. Toga, it's so nice to meet you. Deku, and these 2 are my sons, Daisuke and Haru. Daisuke, and nice to meet you. Seeing the family he made, Inko smiled. Inko, you have a beautiful family Izuku. Deku, thank you mom, and we actually expecting a third child. Inko, you are. Toga, yes we are. Inko, that's just wonderful. As Bakugo stood there watching, he decided to ask something very important to him. Bakugo, so Deku, do you think you'll ever go back to society? Hearing that, Deku looked over at Bakugo and smiled at him. Deku, one day we all will, but until then we will wait here and live freely. Bakugo, well it's not the case, you'll definitely have my support when you and your Nomu come out to the public. Deku, thank you Bakugo, I appreciate that. After that was said, Deku threw a feast for Bakugo and Inko. Afterwards Bakugo left, while Inko stayed with Izuku, Toga, and grandchildren. As Bakugo was leaving the forest he was just so happy to see his friend again and couldn't wait to see him again next time. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and now we will see you in the next video.